Chapter 1178. That afternoon, Su Yi's magic airship landed in an open space in a manor outside Saucer City. When Su Yi came out of the cabin, there were several dozen magicians wearing magician robes who were at least 40 years old that came forward to greet him. The one in front was the current president of the Mana Magic Kingdom's Sorcerers Guild, who was also the director of the Mana Magic Kingdom's Magic Research Facility, Great Magician Forex. Behind him were the magicians of the Mana Magic Kingdom's Magic Research Facility. Chairman Su, for you to personally come to this magic conference, it really makes me feel honored. Welcome, welcome. Great Magician Forex warmly greeted Su Yi, leading the other magicians to respectfully greet Su Yi. Su Yi revealed a faint smile as he looked over Great Magician Forex and the other magicians behind him. He thought that even though these people were this respectful on the surface, it was hard to say what they were thinking in their hearts. Chairman Forex, you're too polite. Actually, Mentor Carmilla also wanted to come to this conference, but she hasn't been feeling well recently, and it's not convenient for her to travel, so I could only come in her place. Not feeling well? Great Magician Forest was a bit surprised. Great Magician Forex was a bit surprised. Mentor Carmilla, Su Yi waved his hand with a smile. It's nothing serious, it's just that the weather is cold, and she caught a cold. It's like this, that's good, that's good. Great Magician Forex let out a sigh of relief before revealing a smile. He led Su Yi into the manor. Su Yi walked while casually asking, "Right, Chairman Forex, although I accepted the invitation to come to this conference, I forgot to ask because I was too busy. What is the main topic of this conference?" Great Magician Forex looked at Su Yi with a deep look in his eyes as he replied, "The main topic has already been decided yesterday, it is to discuss the restoration of the magician ranking." The corners of Su Yi's eyes twitched, but he did not show any surprise. His voice turned cold as he continued to ask, "Oh? Who proposed this topic?" Great Magician Forrest gave a soft cough. It was proposed by Archmagus Gascoigne. Su Yi gave an O sound and nodded, not asking anything else. The Archmage Gascoigne that Great Magician Forex mentioned was actually the previous president of the Sorcerers Guild, Roderick Gascoigne. 10 years ago, after New Flyer joined forces with the Kingdom of Roer to defeat the two empires, the Continental Sorcerers Guild was forced to settle with the Continental Sorcerers Survival and Employment Protection Association. Both parties agreed to lead the sorcerers of the continent together. After 2 years, the previous president of the Continental Sorcerers Guild, Roderick Gascoigne, finally made a breakthrough in magic research and became an Archmagus. According to the convention of the Continental Sorcerers Guild, Archmagi could not hold any positions in the Sorcerers Guild, so he stepped down from the position of president of the Sorcerers Guild. But stepping down from this position did not mean that he did not care anymore. Before becoming an Archmagus, Roderick Gascoigne had already been the president of the Continental Sorcerers Guild for 3 consecutive terms. In a total of 15 years, he had accumulated a very deep foundation and connections. So even though he stepped down from this position, he still firmly controlled the Continental Sorcerers Guild behind the scenes. Because of the New Flyer, the Continental Sorcerers Guild's influence on the signs was not as strong as before. But the Sorcerers Guild had a history of thousands of years in the signs and still had a strong influence on matters related to the continent's sorcerers. In the first few years, Archmage Gascoigne didn't do anything special. It was as if he was really living a retired life and peacefully being an Archmagus. But in the last 3 years, his activities had gradually increased. Most of his activities were to strengthen the Sorcerers Guild's influence on the continent's Sorcerers Guild. To him, this was understandable. As long as he didn't ruin Su Yi's plans, Su Yi would be too lazy to care about his actions. But from his recent actions, it was clear that he had other plans. This was something Su Yi couldn't tolerate. Su Yi continued to walk into the manor and didn't seem to have any intention of replying to Great Magus Forex's words. But Great Magus Forex couldn't hold it in any longer. After a while, he asked Sui, Chairman Su, do you have any thoughts on this issue? He was just trying to sound him out. Sui smiled and shook his head. I don't have any opinions. As long as the majority of the continent's mages agree, then I naturally won't oppose it. Great Magus Forex's expression froze. He thought that Sui would immediately oppose this issue and even angrily criticize Archmage Gascoigne. But Sui was acting very indifferent, as if he didn't care about this issue at all. This was outside of his expectations. The other magicians who were following behind the two heard the conversation between the two, and their expressions revealed varying degrees of surprise. The reason why Archmage Gascoigne brought up this issue was very clear. The mages of the continent were ranked by the continent's Sorcerers Guild for thousands of years. It was also a powerful tool they used to control the mages of the continent. But with the rise of New Flyer and Suyi's actions, the mages of the continent no longer cared about the rankings. Instead, they cared more about the mages' skills. This was no longer under the control of the continent's Sorcerers Guild. Instead, it was mostly under the control of the mages of New Flyer and the mages of the continent. Because of this, without the ranking system that affected the mages of the continent, the Sorcerers Guild's influence on the mages of the signs became weaker and weaker. It was to the point that many mages didn't even need to pay attention to the Sorcerers Guild anymore. Some even treated it as if it didn't exist. Archmage Gascoigne was naturally very unwilling to accept this. He had brought up the idea of reinstating the mage ranking in this meeting in hopes of obtaining the agreement of the participating mages and regaining control over the continent's mages. However, Sui was the one who pushed for the reformation of the continent's mage system. Almost all the mages of the continent had changed their stance and joined the magic machine industry. Since he was also participating in this meeting, he would definitely strongly oppose this issue. Even if Sui didn't show any signs of opposition, no one believed that he would turn a blind eye to this. The group of people quickly entered the large manor specially prepared for this meeting. After crossing a wide lawn, they were met with a group of mages wearing mage robes. The one at the front was the Archmage Gascoigne that Sui and Great Magician Forest had mentioned. Seeing Sui from afar, Archmage Gascoigne immediately walked over with a big smile. He grabbed Suyi's hand and shook it as he enthusiastically said, "It is truly rare for Chairman Su to take time out of his busy schedule to participate in this meeting." Sui smiled and pulled his hand back. "Sir Gascoigne, no matter what, I am still one of the archmages of the continent. I am a part of the continent's mages. It is natural for me to participate in such an important magic research meeting. Moreover, our New Flyers policy has always been to conduct scientific research on magic. How could I give up such a good opportunity to share my research with everyone?" Archmage Gascoigne laughed again. That's right. Chairman Su has always been passionate about magic research. Otherwise, you wouldn't have become the strongest archmage in your 40s. Sui shook his head. "No, the magic research I'm talking about isn't about how to become an archmage. It's about the science of magic." Archmage Gascoigne's expression changed slightly. After a pause, he suddenly said with a serious expression, "Chairman Su, do you think that becoming an archmage conflicts with the science of magic?" "Of course not." Sui shook his head. "The so-called science of magic includes all aspects of magic research. Naturally, it also includes the research needed to become an archmage. However, in my opinion, the research needed to become an archmage doesn't have much meaning. Becoming an archmage is just a title, so there's no need to place too much importance on it." Once these words were said, not only Archmage Gascoigne's expression changed, but everyone else's as well. Of the people gathered here, apart from Sui and Gascoigne who were archmages, the weakest was a powerful great mage. Becoming an archmage could be considered their lifelong dream. However, Su Yi was now saying that the research needed to become an archmage was meaningless. This was the same as saying that everything they had done in the past 10 years was meaningless. If it was anyone else who said this, they would definitely loudly refute or even berate them. However, since it was Su Yi who said this, they could only remain silent. This was because Su Yi himself was an archmage. Many people even believed that he was the strongest archmage on the continent. Moreover, he strongly advocated the scientific research of magic and was the representative of the new magic research system that had been created in recent years. Therefore, he had the right to say this. Archmage Gascoigne narrowed his eyes. After a while, he asked in a low voice, "So, Chairman Su, you think that there's no meaning in evaluating a mage's rank?" Facing everyone's gazes, Su Yi smiled faintly, but then shook his head. "No, I still think that it's very meaningful." Chapter 1179. Everyone looked at Su Yi in confusion. He had been speaking for a long time, denying what Archmagus Gascoigne had said. Why did he suddenly say that the most important topic was meaningful? Wasn't this contradicting himself? Archmagus Gascoigne slightly knit his brows. "Chairman Su, what do you think is the meaning?" "The meaning? Of course it's to let the magicians of the continent determine who is better and give them a goal to strive for. Actually, it's not that different from the previous mage ranking system that the Sorcerers' Guild implemented." Hearing this answer, Great Magus Gascoigne's expression changed. Everyone else revealed an expression of, as expected. If Su Yi thought the same as Great Magus Gascoigne and the Sorcerers' Guild, that would be an inconceivable matter. His current reaction was normal. "Then Chairman Su, what is the mage ranking system that you mentioned?" Great Magus Gascoigne asked. Su Yi looked at him and shook his head with a faint smile. "Isn't this the most important topic of the meeting? Let's leave it for later." Archmagus Gascoigne's expression sunk, but he quickly recovered his smile and nodded. "That's right, the meeting hasn't officially started yet, so there's no need to rush." After saying this, Archmagus Gascoigne changed the topic and the group of people chatted as they entered the manor. At this time, there were many famous magicians from all over the signs gathered in the manor. Among them were over 10 peak archmagi and over 400 great magicians. This could be considered the largest gathering of magicians in the signs in the past few years. The reason for this grand occasion was actually closely related to Su Yi. Before Su Yi decided to participate in this meeting, the meeting was organized by the Sorcerers' Guild and organized by the Mana Magic Kingdom, so 4 archmagi and close to 100 great magicians were invited. However, when the news of Su Yi agreeing to participate spread, this number increased by several times. From this, it could be seen that Su Yi's position in the hearts of the magicians in the signs was very high. So even if there were over 10 archmagi present, Su Yi still attracted everyone's attention when he walked in. In an instant, countless people surrounded him and greeted Su Yi. At this time, there was another difference between Su Yi and other magicians. When magicians greeted each other, they would call each other by their surname and magician rank. But for Su Yi, the peak archmagician, they all called him Chairman Su. On one hand, this was because Su Yi's status as the chairman of the New Flyer far exceeded his reputation as an archmagus. On the other hand, Su Yi always emphasized that he was a businessman and the chairman of the New Flyer in public. This made it clear to everyone that he was biased, so they naturally wouldn't call him wrongly. In the face of everyone's enthusiasm, Su Yi only nodded casually to the great magicians as a response. He would only formally return the greetings to the 13 archmagi and exchange a few words of greeting as a response. None of the magic casters felt that his attitude was inappropriate. Even if Su Yi's status as the chairman of the New Flyer wasn't mentioned, just his status as an archmagus was enough to give him the right to be arrogant. After everyone took their seats, the only ones who had the right to sit and talk to Su Yi were the archmagi. Even the great magicians could only stay far away, not daring to disturb him. However, Sui wasn't very satisfied with this situation. Sui and the new flyer had been working on breaking down the authority of the Continental Sorcerers Guild and breaking down the system of magicians that had been established in the past, making it easier for magicians to reconsider where they could be used. However, after more than 10 years of evolution, although the new flyer's strength and guidance had caused most magicians to throw themselves into the magic machine industry, there were still many magicians who couldn't change their mindset. For example, even though the normal magicians of the signs didn't care much about their own magician rank, and were more concerned about their ability to research and practice magic machine technology, almost all magicians still cared a lot about the rank of Great Magician or even Archmagus. Great magicians still enjoyed special treatment in the various countries of the continent. If they were willing to apply for a job in a merchant guild, they would naturally receive remuneration that far exceeded that of a normal magician. As for Archmagi, their status wasn't affected at all. In fact, due to the loss of several magicians in the battle between the two empires and the new flyer 10 years ago, the number of magicians on the continent had decreased, and the status of the remaining Archmagi had increased. However, these Archmagi weren't like normal magicians who were willing to throw themselves into the magic machine industry. Take the 13 Archmagi present as an example. 5 of them had openly expressed that they wouldn't throw themselves into the research of the magic machine industry, and that Su Yi's new scientific concept of magic was completely unorthodox. They had always been against it. Even among the remaining 8 Archmagi, only 4 Archmagi had openly expressed their support for Su Yi's new concept. However, none of them were willing to throw themselves into the research of the magic machine industry. Including Su Yi, of the remaining 22 Archmagi in the signs, only Su Yi, Mentor Carmilla, and 3 other Archmagi from the two empires had truly thrown themselves into the research of the magic machine industry. There were only 5 of them in total. Of course, Su Yi was very dissatisfied with this situation, but he also understood that the views of the signs for thousands of years couldn't be changed so easily. This was especially true for the Archmagi who stood at the peak of all magicians. Due to their superior strength, they wouldn't easily change their views. It was a good thing that Su Yi didn't really care about them. Although it required the participation of those who stood at the very peak to carry out a detailed and systematic research of a subject, the ones who truly laid the foundation and carried it forward were the tens of thousands of researchers at the bottom. It was these people who worked hard bit by bit to gradually perfect the system and make it better and better. Therefore, Su Yi was never willing to waste time and energy on these top magicians. Instead, he was willing to invest more in the cultivation of new magicians who hadn't come into contact with too much magic theory. Because these people hadn't been bound by the old magic system, they easily accepted Su Yi's new system of magic theory. When they grew up, it would be the time when the new system would truly flourish. At the same time, it was easier for the tens of thousands of ordinary magicians on the continent to change their views. For example, New Flyer and almost all the countries on the continent had signed the Continental Peace Treaty, restricting magicians from joining the army. Although there had been some chaos at first after participating in the war, tens of thousands of ordinary magicians on the continent had all thrown themselves into the magic machine industry in less than 2 years. They had now become the backbone of the various regions. The rapid development of the magic machine industry in the signs in the past 10 years couldn't have been done without the great contributions of these people. In comparison, it was the archmages who stood at the peak of all mages and were worshipped by almost everyone who contributed much less. However, no matter how much he didn't care, Su Yi couldn't completely ignore them. After all, these archmagi were at the peak of all magicians. Their own understanding of magic far exceeded that of ordinary magicians. If they were willing to throw themselves into the research of the magic machine industry, it would naturally be easier for them to contribute more than ordinary magicians. Moreover, these arch-magi were all important figures in their respective countries and had always enjoyed great fame. As long as they were willing to do research related to the magic machine industry, it would represent the direction of the wind and attract even more magicians to throw themselves into it. Therefore, Sue would still work hard to build a good relationship with these people and do everything he could to bring them into the magic machine industry. Chairman Sue, since you've come to participate in this meeting, I'm sure you'll have some amazing viewpoints to raise, right? Sitting next to Sue was Arch-Magus Hilbert of the Mana Magic Kingdom. After exchanging a few words, he asked Sue a question. This question immediately attracted the attention of the 10 or so other arch-magi around them. The number of times Sue had participated in the continent's magician gatherings was actually very few. However, every time he did, he would always raise some viewpoints that were very different from the previous magic research system. Often, the other magicians would be surprised and even question him. However, after so many years of accumulation, the viewpoints that Sue raised were always able to receive strong confirmation and finally gained the approval of all the magicians. After so many times, the other magicians rarely questioned Sue. Instead, they looked forward to the new viewpoints that he would raise every time. Sue smiled and shook his head. I'm not participating in this meeting to present any new theories. I'm purely here to discuss the current situation of the continent's magicians with everyone. Everyone revealed a puzzled expression. Discuss the current situation of the continent's magicians? What exactly were they discussing? Arch-Magus Gascoigne, on the other hand, frowned deeply. Sue's words and his previous actions made him feel that something was very unusual. Sue's visit this time was probably not as simple as he said. Chapter 1180. The conference wasn't officially held, so of course it was just some small talk that didn't have any meaning. Sue didn't have that much time to talk here. He didn't come to the Mana Magic Kingdom just to participate in this conference. He had something else to do. So after sitting for a while and chatting with the other magicians, Sue bid farewell and left. The one who left with him was the high-grade magician that the Mana Magic Kingdom had sent to organize this conference. He was a high-level member of the Mana Magic Kingdom's Sorcerers Guild and also a high-level official of the Mana Magic Kingdom. This kind of situation where a magician held two positions at the same time wouldn't appear in the other countries of the continent, but it was very normal in the Mana Magic Kingdom. Other than being in charge of organizing this important conference, the most important thing was to receive the guests. For someone like Sue, who could be considered the most important guest, he was specially received by the king of the Mana Magic Kingdom. Sue had already contacted the Mana Magic Kingdom before coming, so they didn't need to waste any time. After leaving the manor, the two got into a magic sedan that was prepared to receive guests and quickly headed to the south of Saucer City. Chairman Sue, the location of the new factory has been chosen and the foundation has been built. It will be by the Maya Heavenly River in the south of the city, and there is a road that has been widened. After the products are produced in the future, it will be very convenient to transport them on land or water. Sitting in the car, Magician Van Horn, who was in charge of receiving guests, introduced their destination to Sue. I don't doubt your side's abilities, but, as for the future plans of this factory, I wonder if His Majesty has thought it through? This. Van Horn revealed a hesitant smile before replying. His Majesty and the Lords of the Parliament have been discussing this over the past few days, waiting for Chairman Sue to come before making the final decision. Is that so? Sue softly asked back with a bit of disappointment in his heart. The new flyer and the Mana Magic Kingdom had already been in contact with each other for the heavy magic machine production base last year. It was hard to confirm this in the first half of this year, but they never thought that after half a year, they would only be building the foundation of a single factory. They didn't even know if the entire base would be established, so the efficiency was very low. New Flyer agreeing to cooperate with the Mana Magic Kingdom and transferring large amounts of heavy magic machine technology was already Su Yi's generous performance. However, the Mana Magic Kingdom didn't grasp this chance and kept delaying it, so how could Su Yi not be disappointed? Of course, Van Horn could see Su Yi's expression. He quickly smiled and said, "In fact, His Majesty and the Lords of the Parliament have basically reached a consensus. Now, they just want to negotiate with you, Chairman Su. I ask Chairman Su to be assured, since this base has already been planned, the kingdom will not give up halfway." Su Yi gave a slight nod, not agreeing or disagreeing with this. New Flyer had cooperated with the various countries of the continent over the years. Most of the countries were very enthusiastic about this project, but there were also some that weren't that enthusiastic. There were many reasons for this, so Su Yi naturally wouldn't care about them all. After all, there were many countries, companies, and organizations that wanted to cooperate with New Flyer, so they didn't lack one or two. If he cared about them all, he would have been half dead from exhaustion. But the Mana Magic Kingdom's project this time was different. This was a project that Su Yi rarely proposed and was personally in charge of, so New Flyer attached great importance to this. Even if the scale of this project wasn't that big, it was very rare to see a project of this level. However, the Mana Magic Kingdom kept pushing and dragging, and didn't seem to be actively cooperating at all, which made Su Yi a little unhappy. The reason why he attached so much importance to this project was actually because of the importance of the Mana Magic Kingdom. This country was famous for its magic, and the reason why it could become the third largest country after the two empires was because of the large number of mages in the country. Su Yi was trying to change the way the signs viewed and used magic, and the Mana Magic Kingdom was naturally a very important part of this. So he had always hoped to cooperate with the Mana Magic Kingdom and let them fully integrate into the magic industry. But because of the Peace of Mages Convention that Su Yi instigated, mages were restricted from joining the army and the ability to participate in wars, so the Mana Magic Kingdom, which mainly relied on mages, suffered the most losses. If it wasn't for the New Flyer being able to suppress the situation on the continent, the Mana Magic Kingdom's national strength would have been greatly reduced because of this. So for the New Flyer, the Mana Magic Kingdom's view had always been very complicated. They wanted to strengthen their national strength through cooperation with the New Flyer, but because of the New Flyer, many mages in the Mana Magic Kingdom were resentful and unwilling to cooperate. The New Flyer's promotion of the magic industry in other countries was very smooth, but in the Mana Magic Kingdom, they often hit a wall. Even the projects that were personally led by Su Yi were difficult to progress smoothly. "I plan to have an audience with His Majesty in 2 days, help me tell him." Su Yi thought for a moment and said to Van Horn. Van Horn immediately nodded. "His Majesty has long wanted to meet with Chairman Su. He will be very happy to know that you are coming." Su Yi gave an unsound and didn't ask any more questions. The magic sedan quickly drove the two of them down the smooth road, and in less than half an hour, they arrived at the base Van Horn mentioned. However, after getting out of the car, Su Yi looked up and he couldn't help deeply knitting his brows. The base Van Horn mentioned, when he looked over it, it was just a desolate primitive river. Other than the piles of sand by the river, and some people who seemed to be busy, this place could even be considered desolate. How could there be a base that was being built? "This is the base you've been preparing for half a year?" Su Yi looked at the scene in front of him and his voice turned cold. Van Horn of course knew that this scene wouldn't satisfy Su Yi. He wiped his sweat and pointed at the piles of sand in the distance as he explained, "The first magic machine workshop in the plan has already been laid. As long as we move fast, we can build it at the beginning of next year." "As long as we move fast?" Su Yi couldn't help giving a cold laugh. The Amsterdam Chamber of Commerce in the outside world always had the evaluation of fast construction and good quality, but that was based on the fact that the Amsterdam Chamber of Commerce had a large amount of manpower and magic machines. But in this so-called base, other than a few people, there wasn't a single magic machine to be seen, so how could it be fast? What made Sui even more dissatisfied and angry was that even if the Mana Magic Kingdom didn't care that much about this project, since they knew that he was here to inspect it, they would at least give him a bit of face. Wouldn't they act like they were in full swing when he came? But now the Mana Magic Kingdom wasn't even willing to give him a bit of face. Either they didn't have this idea at all or the Mana Magic Kingdom was arguing too fiercely about this matter, so no one was willing to give him a bit of face. Thinking of this, Sui gave a cold snort. He looked at Van Horn and said in a deep voice, "If your Mana Magic Kingdom isn't interested in this project, you can just say it. Our new flyer isn't a small company that asks people to do things for us. As long as you clearly state it, I promise that we won't meddle in this in the future." Hearing that Sui was truly angry, Van Horn's forehead was covered in cold sweat. He quickly said with a smile, "Chairman Su, don't misunderstand. Our kingdom is very willing to cooperate with your company, but there are some obstacles in the kingdom. Now that Chairman Su is here, I believe that these small obstacles won't be a problem and can be easily solved. What do you think? I hope it's like this." Sui waved his hand with a cold expression. Since this so-called base wasn't worth seeing at all, Sui was too lazy to stay here. He looked at the construction site that was still slowly working and shook his head before turning to head back to the magic sedan. After taking 2 steps, he suddenly heard a loud noise from behind him. Turning back in surprise, he saw a group of people who came from who knew where. They charged into the construction site and were loudly beating the workers who were still working. Sui was stunned. What is going on here? Van Horn carefully looked at Sui before saying with a forced smile, "It seems like someone is causing trouble." "Nonsense, I can see it." Sui glared at him. After looking at it for a bit, he found that something was strange. Among the people who had rushed in to attack the workers, there were actually several magicians. This made him very curious. Although the status of magicians had dropped over the years and they weren't as high up as before, compared to normal people, magicians were still respected and their status was much higher than normal people. Normal magicians wouldn't participate in this kind of beating and scolding of workers. It was beneath their status. Sui narrowed his eyes and watched for a while. Van Horn on the side didn't make a sound, as if he was planning to sit and watch this happen. Seeing Sui turn over, Van Horn knew what he meant and shook his head with a bitter smile. "I don't care about this matter, so it's not convenient for me to meddle. I ask Chairman Su for forgiveness." Of course Sui didn't believe him. Since he was the one who brought him here to watch this play, how could he not have the right to meddle in this matter? This meant that he was planning to sit and watch. Sui looked at the people causing trouble in the distance and knit his brows. What was the Mana Magic Kingdom thinking? What good would it do for them to act like they wanted to chase him away? Chapter 1181. The trouble that happened here should be handled by the Mana Magic Kingdom. Sui didn't want to intervene, so he just shook his head and prepared to leave. However, even though he didn't look for trouble, trouble came to him. The group of troublemakers made a ruckus for a while, then they seemed to see someone here and all of them rushed over. "Hey look, this guy looks like Sui." After the crowd rushed over, one of them pointed at Sui and shouted, "It's really him." "That's right. It's Sui. Brothers, this guy actually dares to appear here. We must teach him a lesson." "Yes, it's this guy who caused everyone to have nothing to do. It's a heinous crime." "Yes. Teach him a lesson. Let him know what's good for him." Sui narrowed his eyes and looked at the crowd in front of him that was shouting loudly, but no one dared to rush over. He sneered and turned to Van Horn. "If this is your arrangement, then I can only say that it's a little too low." Van Horn's face changed and he waved his hand. "Chairman Sue, you misunderstood. How could this be our arrangement? I didn't know these guys would suddenly appear." Then, as if to prove his words, Van Horn took 2 steps forward and shouted at the group of people, "Hey! What are you doing here? Chairman Sue is a distinguished guest of the kingdom. If you dare to do anything to him again, believe it or not, I'll immediately send people to arrest you. Hey, go ahead and arrest us if you can. That's right. We can't live anymore anyway, what's there to be afraid of? I'm not even afraid of death on the battlefield, why would I be scared by you? Are you kidding? We are all mages with military positions in the kingdom's army. Who do you think you are to arrest us? Military mages." Su Yi's expression changed. He glanced at the group of people, thought for a moment, and understood. "Van Horn, are they the mages that were eliminated by the kingdom's army because of the peace pact of mages?" Van Horn nodded awkwardly. "Yes. Actually, most of the mages who were eliminated have already found suitable jobs in various chambers of commerce and research institutions, but there are still some who are unwilling to do so. They prefer to serve in the army, so..." Linley quickly explained. "Oh, I understand." Su Yi glanced at the group of people. "Looks like they're just a bunch of defeated dogs. They're not worth paying much attention to." Su Yi deliberately did not lower his voice when he said the last sentence, so it naturally fell into the ears of that group of people. The faces of the group of people changed, and they began to clamor again. "Who are you calling a loser? What right do you have to say that about us? If it wasn't for your new flyers' damned magician's peace pact, would we have ended up like this? That's right. It's all your fault. You still have the nerve to stand in front of us and talk nonsense. Do you really think we don't dare to do anything?" Su Yi looked at them in amusement. "You've been shouting for a while, so if you want to make a move, I won't stop you." The group of people angrily glared at Su Yi, but not a single person dared to make a move. Since they recognized Su Yi, they were very clear on Su Yi's identity. They knew that Su Yi was an archmagus. They were at most 7th-grade magicians. How could they dare make a move against an archmagus like Su Yi? Su Yi revealed a smile of contempt and was too lazy to care about them. He just said to Van Horn, "Please tell His Majesty that if your country can't even take care of this small matter, I will have doubts about your country's cooperation. I'm afraid this will greatly affect our cooperation." After saying this, he ignored Van Horn and with a slight tremble, he flew into the air. Van Horn and the others looked up in surprise, but they saw a magic airship that had come from who knows where. It was right in front of Su Yi, taking him in. Watching the magic airship fly away, Van Horn and the others were stunned. After a while, one of them looked at Van Horn with a depressed look. "Sir Van Horn, this fellow. Why doesn't he follow the rules?" Van Horn glared at them, but he had nothing to say. After a while, he gave a long sigh and shook his head. "This Chairman Sue, he really is unexpected." ####. The magic airship flew at close to 200 kilometers an hour and soon passed Saucer City. It landed in a small town 40 kilometers southeast of Saucer City. When Su Yi came out of the cabin, there was a slender figure that charged at him and threw herself into his embrace. "Father, you're finally here." Freya tightly hugged Su Yi and rubbed her face against his chest, as her face filled with joy. Su Yi laughed and reached out to rub her head before pushing her away. "All right, you're already a big girl, why are you still acting like a spoiled little girl? In front of you, I will always be a child." Freya replied with a smile before revealing a bit of doubt. "Right, didn't they say that you were discussing something with the people of the Mana Magic Kingdom, and that it might take quite a bit of time? I thought that I would only see you at night, but I never thought that you would be back this early." Su Yi thought of what had just happened and shook his head with knitted brows. Seeing Su-Yi's expression, Freya was surprised and quickly asked. Su-Yi considered it before telling Freya everything that had just happened. Freya, if you were in my position, what would you do? Freya blinked her eyes, knowing that Su-Yi was taking this opportunity to test her. But after rolling her eyes a few times, she slightly frowned and rudely said to Su-Yi, "Father, you're too emotional." Su-Yi found it funny and asked, "Why do you say that?" You must feel that the people of the Mana Magic Kingdom are not only making excuses for the cooperation, but also using these little tricks to embarrass you, so you're angry and decided to simply break up with them, right? Well, that's probably what I'm thinking, but does this count as being emotional? Of course it counts. Didn't you always tell me that no matter what I do, I have to be clear about my goal and then work hard to achieve this goal, and nothing else will affect my judgment? But now you obviously want to cooperate with the Mana Magic Kingdom, but because of their little tricks, you want to give up. Isn't this being emotional? Freya bluntly criticized. Su-Yi laughed. You're right. But Freya, you don't understand my real goal. Real goal? Freya tilted her head with a puzzled look. Don't you want to cooperate with the Mana Magic Kingdom and vigorously promote the magic industry here? This is only a short-term goal. Su-Yi slightly turned his head, looked in the direction of Sorcery City, and sighed. If I can smoothly promote the magic industry in the Mana Magic Kingdom, then of course I'm willing to put in a lot of effort. But now it's clear that there's a very serious problem in the Mana Magic Kingdom, and their opinions are not unified, so they even used this kind of stupid trick in front of me. So I think it's good to let them go for now. But when you did this in other countries, you also encountered a lot of difficulties, but you never said that you want to give up? Freya was still very puzzled. The past is the past, as for now. I've basically completed the mission in signs, so the rest should be solved by themselves. Those who are willing to follow the trend of the times will naturally follow, and those who are not, let them be eliminated. Freya frowned and looked at Su-Yi with great doubt. In her impression, her father was always full of vitality and motivation, always moving towards the goal he set, and never had any thoughts of retreat or compromise. Why did he decide to give up after encountering a small setback this time? Even if this was only temporary, it was still completely different from his previous style. Thinking of this, Freya was a little worried and grabbed Su-Yi's hand and asked with a concerned face, "Father, did something happen that made you feel discouraged?" Su-Yi was stunned, and seeing Freya's concerned face, he immediately understood that she misunderstood. There are indeed some things that made me disappointed, but to say that I'm discouraged is not the case. Do you think that my approach this time is a little different from before? Freya nodded vigorously. There's a reason for this. Su-Yi pondered for a moment and suddenly asked, Freya, how did the Canla Empire reply to your question about Teresa? Freya was startled, and didn't understand why Su-Yi suddenly changed the topic. But after thinking for a moment, she let out a string of bell-like laughter. "Ha ha, father, you can't imagine how wonderful their expressions were when I took out those two pictures, and then asked Duke Garbut and Iskender Marquis about Teresa's name." Su-Yi revealed a faint smile. "I can roughly guess it. After all, this is a secret that the Canla Empire has always kept. They thought that no one knew about it, but you exposed it. It would be strange if they weren't shocked." Freya laughed for a while, then slowly restrained her expression and continued, "When I left, Duke Garbut personally sent me off. He asked me to tell you that he hopes that you can go to the Canla Empire when you have time. He has something important to discuss with you face to face. If it's about this matter, I'm not interested." Su-Yi shook his head. "Anyway, the two pictures that I asked you to pass to them have been taken, and the questions have been asked. There's no need to pay attention to other things." Freya was surprised. "So? You don't intend to pursue this matter? They are secretly developing military magic machines." Sui shrugged. Let them develop it. As long as it's not public research, I'm too lazy to care. Freya frowned deeply and looked at Sui very puzzled. Why? Father's way of dealing with things has become so gentle now? Is it because he's old? Freya looked at Suyi's young face that didn't have any wrinkles at all. No matter how she looked at it, he was only in his early 30s. She didn't want to believe her own guess. Chapter 1182. The 7th Continental Mage Research Conference organized by the Mana Magic Kingdom was successfully held. The main topic of the conference this time was to restore the mage rank rating. Most of the mages who participated in the conference were supportive of this topic. After all, for the mages of signs, the mage rank rating was a standard that had been passed down since the establishment of the Sorcerers' Guild. It had a very long history. Although in recent years, because of Sui and the new flyer, many mages didn't care about the mage rank rating anymore. There weren't many mages who participated in the conference at all, so the Sorcerers' Guild simply stopped operating in recent years. However, in the hearts of the majority of mages, especially the high-level mages, the mage rank rating still had a very important meaning. Therefore, when this topic was raised, it received a lot of support. However, everyone was very clear that the traditional mage rank rating had lost its meaning. With the new flyer's extremely strong situation and the rapid development of the magic machine industry in the signs, the mages of the continent had a huge change in mindset. For the majority of mages now, the strength of an individual's magic was no longer that important. What was important was to be able to apply their understanding of magic to the magic machine industry and obtain a better job. Therefore, although the Magic Caster Guild had put in a lot of effort to come up with this topic, the core content of the topic was still about how to give a more detailed evaluation of the mages on the continent, as well as how to be more closely related to the magic machine industry. In this aspect, among the mages who participated in the conference, there was no doubt that the new flyer's president, Sui, had the most right to speak. As the president of the Magic Machine Industry Chamber of Commerce that represented the continent's top and most complete magic machine industry, as well as a top mage, Sui obviously had the most profound understanding of the combination of mages and the magic machine industry. Therefore, when the main topic was discussed, Sui naturally became the core of the discussion. However, Sui unexpectedly didn't give many opinions from the beginning to the end. He only brought out the mage rank rating system that had been implemented in the new flyer for more than 20 years for everyone's reference. As for other aspects, he did not say much. Even until the end of the discussion, when most of the sorcerers expressed their support for the restoration of the Sorcerers' Guild's level assessment, Sui did not express his opposition as many people expected. Of course, he did not explicitly support it either. During the other times of the meeting, which was when they weren't discussing the main topic, Sui was very active. Not only did he enthusiastically participate in many of the popular magic research topics discussed in the meetings, he even surprisingly shared a lot of the research results within New Flyer. This performance made all the mages in the meeting overjoyed. After Sui proposed and established a new scientific research system with New Flyer, all the mages on the continent who began to use this new system to research magic experienced the benefits of this new system. The most important aspect of this new research system was the sharing of knowledge, because this was the only way to deepen everyone's understanding of magic. However, due to the limitations of the past, the mages on the continent always liked to hide the results of their research, and only they knew about it. The biggest exception was Sui and New Flyer. Sui would often publish all kinds of new research results in the Shinfei Magic Industry Weekly, and New Flyer would also publish the research results of the Shinfei Academy of Magic from time to time. This practice allowed the mages on the signs to deepen their understanding of the scientific research of magic over the years, and their understanding of magic had also increased greatly. Therefore, no matter how the mages on the continent felt about Sui, they all felt a trace of gratitude towards Sui in their hearts. If it weren't for Sui, many mages would probably never be able to reach new heights in their lives. Now that Sui had once again published a large number of new research results at this research conference, it naturally attracted more praise and respect from the other mages. Of course, Sui didn't only publish the results to the mages who attended the conference, but also to the entire continent. Therefore, any mage and any country could share these results. As for how much they could obtain in the end, it would depend on their own abilities. Because of Suyi's generosity and enthusiasm, and because he unexpectedly didn't raise any objections to the main topic, the 7th Continental Magic Research Conference was held very smoothly and could be said to have been a great success. However, in another aspect related to Sui, it was a completely different scene. On the day Sui left in a huff in front of Van Horn, the officials of the Mana Magic Kingdom immediately sent someone to apologize to Sui, and in the name of the king of the Mana Magic Kingdom, they sent an invitation to a formal meeting with Sui. However, Sui didn't say anything about this at all, as if he didn't receive the invitation at all. Then, the officials of the new flyer sent an ultimatum to the Mana Magic Kingdom, asking the Mana Magic Kingdom to come up with a complete and effective cooperation plan before the end of the year to determine the specific process of cooperation between the two sides. Otherwise, the new flyer would unilaterally terminate the previous agreement, which would mean that the cooperation between the two sides would be completely invalid. With the current strength of the new flyer in signs, even the two empires would have to treat this seriously, let alone the Mana Magic Kingdom. Therefore, after receiving this ultimatum, the officials of the Mana Magic Kingdom immediately contacted the new flyer, expressing that the Mana Magic Kingdom was sincere enough to cooperate with this cooperation, and promised to come up with a suitable plan as soon as possible. But just when Sui thought that the Mana Magic Kingdom would take this seriously, a large-scale demonstration suddenly broke out in Sasri City. There was no specific count of the total number of people who participated in the demonstration, but according to what Sui saw with his own eyes, there should be at least 30,000 people, and there were actually many mages wearing magic robes mixed in with them, indicating their identity. The slogan of the demonstration was very surprising. It was actually shouting, "New Flyer, get out of the Mana Magic Kingdom," in unison. When the new flyer and the Mana Magic Kingdom were discussing in-depth cooperation, and the president of the new flyer, Sui, was even in Sasri City, such a large-scale demonstration broke out at this time, which immediately attracted the attention of countless people. The reporters of the major newspapers gathered in Sasri City in an instant, and reported on this large-scale demonstration that lasted for 5 days. Regarding the inside story of this demonstration, the major newspapers analyzed a lot, and the results were all different. However, there was a unified conclusion, and that was that the Mana Magic Kingdom was full of hostility towards the new flyer, and was far from welcoming the arrival of the new flyer as warmly as the other countries of the continent. Everyone was very concerned about Suyi's response to this matter, but Sui did not accept any interview at all, and never expressed any views on this matter in public. The new flyer only said that this was caused by some of the Mana Magic Kingdom's people misunderstanding the new flyer, and that it would not affect the cooperation between the Mana Magic Kingdom and the new flyer. The Mana Magic Kingdom also said that this demonstration was just the behavior of the kingdom's people, and had nothing to do with the kingdom's officials, and that it would not affect the cooperation between the two sides. On the surface, it seemed that both sides did not take this matter seriously, as if it was just a small disturbance. But in fact, the Mana Magic Kingdom's internal voices against the new flyer were getting louder and louder. After the demonstration in Sasri City was quelled with great difficulty, there were as many as 17 cities in the Mana Magic Kingdom that also broke out in demonstrations, and the slogans were exactly the same as the ones in Sasri City. In addition to the demonstrations, there was a wave of boycott of the New Flyer, refused to buy all the products of the New Flyer in the Mana Magic Kingdom, and in a very short time, it swept the whole Mana Magic Kingdom. In this wave, there were all kinds of bad rumors about the Frestec Chamber of Commerce. Some said that the quality of the products of the New Flyer was actually exaggerated, and that, in fact, it was not that good. Some said that the products of the Mana Magic Kingdom that the New Flyer sold to the Mana Magic Kingdom earned a lot of hard-earned money from the people of the Mana Magic Kingdom, and it was basically draining the blood of the people of the Mana Magic Kingdom. Some said that the New Flyer actually wanted to secretly control the Mana Magic Kingdom by investing in the Mana Magic Kingdom, and when it really controlled the kingdom, it would completely enslave the people of the kingdom. Some even said that all the products of the New Flyer were actually hidden mechanisms, and after using them for a long time, they would be controlled, and some said all kinds of outrageous rumors not only swept the Mana Magic Kingdom, but also spread to other countries through various newspapers, so that there were some waves of boycotts of the New Flyer products in other countries. Fortunately, other than the Mana Magic Kingdom, the influence of the New Flyer on most of the other countries was much greater, and it was easy to dispel these rumors through the magic illusions broadcast to the public through major newspapers and magic projection devices. But in the Mana Magic Kingdom, the situation was almost out of control. However, when everyone's eyes were focused on the New Flyer, waiting for the New Flyer to come up with a solution, the New Flyer suddenly made an announcement to the public. The New Flyer completely withdrew from the Mana Magic Kingdom. Chapter 1183. With the great improvement in transportation and communication brought by the Xinfei Chamber of Commerce, the speed of information transmission in the signs was many times faster than before. When the news of New Flyer announcing the launch of the Mana Magic Kingdom was announced, it spread to almost every corner of the signs in just 2 days. When everyone heard this news, their first reaction was shock, and their second reaction was doubt. New Flyer actually announced that they were withdrawing from a country? Why was this? Ever since New Flyer was established, President Su Yi had always claimed that he wanted to expand the magic industry to the entire continent, and he and the New Flyer led by him had indeed done so. Especially in the past 10 years, although New Flyer had defeated 2 empires and gained a high status in the signs, Su Yi and the New Flyer rarely interfered with other matters, and only focused on developing the magic industry. Therefore, in the past 10 years, New Flyer had cooperated with almost every country in the continent in the magic industry, and constantly showed the results of their own research to the outside world, so that other countries could develop quickly and smoothly. If not for this, signs wouldn't have been able to develop the magic industry so quickly in just 10 years. But now, New Flyer actually announced that they were withdrawing from the Mana Magic Kingdom? Why did they do this? Could it be that because there was a wave of opposition against New Flyer in the Mana Magic Kingdom, New Flyer chose to retreat? What a joke! With New Flyer's current status in the continent, as well as New Flyer's powerful influence and military strength, even if New Flyer wanted to destroy the Mana Magic Kingdom, it wouldn't be a problem. How could they choose to retreat in the face of a wave of opposition from some commoners? Not only was this not in line with the New Flyer's current status, it was also not in line with the personality of the New Flyer's president, Su Yi. It must be known that in the history of New Flyer, whenever there was a situation against the New Flyer, Su Yi's choice had always been to face the difficulties head-on and give a very tough response. What's more, this was only a wave of opposition from the Mana Magic Kingdom. The officials of the Mana Magic Kingdom had never expressed any intention to oppose the New Flyer. They had even publicly explained the wave of opposition in the country many times, saying that it was just a civil action and would not affect the relationship between the Mana Magic Kingdom and the New Flyer. Although no one would believe the official explanation of the Mana Magic Kingdom, since they had shown such an attitude, it meant that at least the Mana Magic Kingdom was willing to cooperate with New Flyer. Of course, there were also many people who guessed that this was simply the wave of opposition from the Mana Magic Kingdom that angered Sui, causing the new flyer to make this decision. When the wave of opposition happened, Sui just happened to be in the Mana Magic Kingdom to participate in the 7th Continental Magic Research Conference. And the Mana Magic Kingdom just happened to have a wave of opposition that almost swept the whole country at this time, and it was getting more and more intense. If there was no real power behind the Mana Magic Kingdom behind it, no one would believe it at all. Many people even concluded that the Mana Magic Kingdom's officials were behind this. As for the purpose, it was probably to use the voices of opposition in the kingdom to obtain the leadership of the cooperation with the new flyer, or some other purpose. But no matter what the purpose was, it was clear that Sui had seen through this point, so he simply announced that the new flyer would completely withdraw from the Mana Magic Kingdom to express his anger. If the new flyer really completely withdrew from the Mana Magic Kingdom, of course, it would lose a lot of benefits from the Mana Magic Kingdom. But in comparison, it was clear that the Mana Magic Kingdom's losses were countless times greater. Now in the signs, every country was extremely eager to cooperate with the new flyer, so that they could obtain a lot of help from the new flyer, so that they could vigorously develop their own magic industry. If there was no new flyer, then it would be almost impossible for them to develop quickly by themselves. But in the current signs, if the magic industry didn't develop well, it meant that the whole country would fall far behind. Even if the Mana Magic Kingdom could be regarded as the 3rd largest country in the signs, and its national strength could be said to be very strong, but if it still couldn't keep up with the development of the times, then it wouldn't have a good ending. So when the news of the new flyer's withdrawal from the Mana Magic Kingdom spread, countless pairs of eyes focused on the new flyer. Everyone wanted to see clearly to what extent the new flyer was planning to go. No one believed that the new flyer would really completely withdraw from the Mana Magic Kingdom, because not only did this go against Suyi's principle of fully developing the magic industry in the continent, but it would also cause the new flyer to lose the huge market of the Mana Magic Kingdom, which was also a very serious loss. The new flyer's public announcement was obviously more of a threat to the Mana Magic Kingdom. But the following development was once again greatly beyond everyone's expectations. After the announcement was made, the new flyer didn't hesitate at all and began to implement this announcement. First, the new flyer's branches in the Mana Magic Kingdom were all closed at the same time, and then the factories were all stopped one after another, and they were all resold. The new flyer's industry was of course the best in the signs, so these factories and branches were quickly sold off one after another, and then a large number of new flyers' personnel in the Mana Magic Kingdom left the Mana Magic Kingdom one after another. After that, the new flyer stopped all cooperation within the Mana Magic Kingdom. They either directly withdrew, or transferred their own parts to other chambers of commerce. In short, they were all cleanly withdrawn and nothing was left. It was reasonable to say that the new flyer had already penetrated all aspects of the Mana Magic Kingdom, and it was involved in more than tens of millions of things. It could be said that it was a very difficult thing to fully withdraw. But the new flyer seemed to have this plan a long time ago, and it looked like they were already prepared. All the withdrawal matters were carried out in an orderly manner, and the speed was unexpectedly fast. Although it wasn't that simple for such a large chamber of commerce to completely withdraw, it would take at least 1 or 2 years to completely withdraw. However, the actions of the Xinfei Chamber of Commerce had clearly shown their attitude to everyone. The new flyer really did want to fully withdraw from the Mana Magic Kingdom. It wasn't a joke, nor was it a false threat. For a time, apart from the Mana Magic Kingdom, almost the entire continent was speechless. Why did the new flyer do this? Dad, what is the reason? Freya shook the large stack of newspapers in her hand, and her eyebrows furrowed slightly. She asked Sui in puzzlement, "Why are you being so ruthless this time? Is it that ruthless?" Sui asked with a smile. Since the people of the Mana Magic Kingdom don't welcome our Chamber of Commerce, then I'll withdraw the Chamber of Commerce. Isn't this fulfilling their wishes? Freya glared at Sue-Yi in annoyance. Dad, can you stop joking around? This kind of childish behavior, I don't believe you're capable of doing it. You think I can't do it? Sue-Yi raised his eyebrows. You should ask your mother more often, and let her tell you how often I throw tantrums. Freya was stunned, and then she rolled her eyes, shook her head, and said, I don't believe you. Even if you throw a childish tantrum in front of your mother, it's only to act spoiled. I don't believe you won't do it in the Chamber of Commerce. Oh, you have a lot of confidence in me. Sue-Yi smiled, and took the newspapers from Freya's hands. He took a few pages and casually looked at them, and then threw them aside. It seems that no one can understand my true meaning. Very good. Hearing the hidden meaning in Sue-Yi's words, Freya's eyes immediately lit up, and she quickly moved closer and said with a smile, Dad, you really have a deep meaning in doing this, right? Tell me, why are you doing this? I've thought about it for many days, and I still can't think of any benefits for our Chamber of Commerce. If it's only benefits for the Chamber of Commerce, perhaps the only thing that can be considered is that we can transfer people from the Mana Magic Kingdom to meet other need. Sue-Yi said with a relaxed face. What kind of benefit is this? Freya's face was full of disbelief. Compared to the loss of the Mana Magic Kingdom, this isn't even worth mentioning, right? Moreover, a large number of people directly left the Chamber of Commerce because they didn't want to leave the Mana Magic Kingdom. This time, the loss of the Chamber of Commerce's personnel is already very serious, right? Yes, that's right. So my decision this time, in the short term, will only be bad for the Chamber of Commerce, and there are no benefits. Freya's eyebrows wrinkled even tighter. Then what about the long-term benefits? Sue-Yi didn't answer, but asked instead, Freya, have you ever thought about why I let you point out that the Kanla Empire was secretly developing military magic machines, but didn't take any further action? Freya was stunned for a moment, tilting her head to think, and muttering to herself, I've thought about it, you should have done it on purpose. Or, you are indulging them. Yes, you guessed right. Then I can't understand it even more. Freya looked at Sue-Yi with some confusion. Didn't you always say that a stable environment is more conducive to the development of the magic industry, so you hope that the signs will always be peaceful and stable? Why now? The signs have indeed been peaceful for the past 10 years, but this is based on the deterrence of our new flyer. But Freya, do you think that our new flyer can maintain this deterrence and suppress the other countries of the continent to be completely obedient? Chapter 1184. Freya thought for a bit before giving a sigh and shaking her head. That's impossible. Not to mention that New Flyer is just a company. Even if Father is a large empire that rules the continent, it's impossible for everyone to be honest and not have any thoughts. So there's no need to insist on meaningless things. I've already forced the continent to develop for 10 years, and in these 10 years, I've achieved my goal. I've greatly improved the lives of the people of the continent. Freya slowly nodded as she looked at Sue-Yi with eyes filled with admiration. If one were to say who the citizens of the signs should thank the most, it wouldn't be any leader of their country, rather it would be Sue-Yi. Because of the new farming model led by the Shinfei Chamber of Commerce, the grain yield of the signs had increased by leaps and bounds. Most of the signs' countries didn't have to suffer from famine like before. In just the past 10 years, the population of the signs had increased by several times. The reason for this was simply because there was enough grain to eat. At the same time, because of the new magic machine industry brought by the New Flyer, countless people could find suitable jobs and earn a decent wage, which they could use to improve their lives. And because of the various household magic machines developed by the New Flyer, the simple lives of people became more and more colorful. People no longer had to work hard to survive like before, they no longer had to work in the fields with their backs to the sky. They could now enjoy all kinds of entertainment in their free time. The Frestec Chamber of Commerce also brought roads and magic cars, completely changing the transportation situation of the continent. It allowed people to easily travel several hundred kilometers or even several thousand kilometers away, no longer having to stay in their homes like before. Other than that, there was also the Magic Communication Network, allowing people to communicate with people who were far away. There was also the Magic Airship, which realized the dreams of normal people. Also, in short, compared to 20 to 30 years ago, science today was almost completely different. It only took a few decades for the people of the signs to enjoy a life that they had never dared to imagine before. And the one who caused all these changes was Sue, who was standing in front of Freya. Every time she thought of this, Freya's heart was filled with pride. She had always firmly believed in her heart that her father was the greatest man in the world. As for the two great emperors of the two empires who were worshipped by millions of people, in Freya's eyes, they were not even qualified to carry Suyi's shoes. "Dad, are you going to rest?" Freya thought for a moment and asked. "No, I don't plan to rest. I'm still young." Suyi smiled and shook his head. "I just feel that I've done enough for the people of this continent, so I plan to be more selfish in the future and invest more energy in my dream." "Your dream?" Freya looked over and pointed at the sky with an excited look. "Is it what you've always said, flying into the universe?" "Yes." "How about it, Freya, are you interested?" "Of course." Freya nodded without any hesitation. "You've told me since I was young that outside the sky, there is a universe that is countless times bigger than this world. Your dream is to explore the universe and my dream is to explore it with you. It's best if you don't rush." Sui shook his head. "You're still young, just this world is enough for you to explore for a long time." "Humph, you really want me to stay and take over the company?" Freya gave a dissatisfied snort. Sui couldn't help laughing. "I didn't say that, you're thinking too much. I just want to tell you that even now, you haven't even explored this world enough, so there's no need to rush into exploring the universe. For example, have you been to the Demon Cloud continent? You're the one who didn't let me go." Freya gave Sui an angry look, but then her eyes widened and she looked excited. "Do you mean you're allowing me to go to the Demon Cloud continent?" "There's no plan for this in the near future." Sui shook his head, then met Freya's disappointed eyes and added, "But before you turn 25, I'll take you to the Demon Cloud continent to see it, and I'll take you to several other continents. I'll take you to the northernmost and southernmost points of this world, so you can see the most dangerous glaciers and experience the coldest climate. How about it? Are you scared?" Freya laughed mischievously. "You're a dog if you're afraid." After chatting with Sui for a while, Freya still didn't forget her initial question and asked, "Dad, you still haven't explained it clearly. You want to work hard for your dreams, that's fine, but this doesn't seem to have much to do with what you've done during this time, right? I've already said that I don't want to continue to insist on meaningless things. I've already laid the foundation for the people of this continent. What happens next is their own choice. I won't forcibly interfere." "In other words, you're going to wash your hands of it? What about the Chamber of Commerce?" Freya asked again. "I didn't say that I'm going to completely ignore the Chamber of Commerce. Don't worry, with our new flyer's current status on the continent, unless we make the most wrong choices, we will always be one of the top chambers of commerce on this continent." Freya looked at Sui in confusion. Wasn't withdrawing from the Mana Magic Kingdom the most wrong choice? In fact, this is also to once again prove to the people of the continent how important the magic industry is to them. Suyi's face flashed a dangerous smile. Those who still want to stubbornly resist and go against this era will only receive the most severe punishment. Hashtag. If it was just based on the surface, the Frestec Chamber of Commerce's withdrawal had an effect on the Mana Magic Kingdom other than a large drop in reputation. It wasn't that serious. Although New Flyer withdrew, they still left the Mana Magic Kingdom with a basically perfect magic industry system. This allowed them to ensure self-sufficiency in most industries. And even in places that were completely inseparable from New Flyer, after New Flyer withdrew, a large number of chambers of commerce from other countries swarmed in. They took the opportunity to seize the vacated market. Due to the fierce competition, the Mana Magic Kingdom was able to benefit from both sides and gain a lot of benefit. This phenomenon was deliberately promoted by some people with ulterior motives inside and outside the Mana Magic Kingdom. This made the withdrawal of New Flyer seem insignificant. For a while, the Mana Magic Kingdom even had a wave of victory in their resistance. They said that resisting New Flyer was the right choice. They fought for the Mana Magic Kingdom's most important resources so that they wouldn't fall into the clutches of New Flyer. This theory seemed very reasonable at first glance and received the support of quite a few people. However, not long after, the Mana Magic Kingdom suffered a blow to the head. At the beginning of February, 3815 of the continental calendar, the Mana Magic Kingdom and the neighboring Ensfran Kingdom were fighting over a magic crystal mine on the border. At first, this was only a small conflict on the border that caused some casualties. But then the conflict kept escalating for various reasons, finally turning into a direct confrontation between the border guards of the two countries. The result of the battle was that both sides suffered injuries, but it wasn't too serious. Because normally when this kind of situation occurred, New Flyer would send out a warning, hoping that both sides would stop and negotiate. However, this time, New Flyer didn't say a word, like this matter didn't happen at all. After everyone recovered from their shock, when New Flyer announced that they were withdrawing from the Mana Magic Kingdom, they said that they wouldn't have any relations with the Mana Magic Kingdom in the future. Then this conflict involving the Mana Magic Kingdom's border was something that New Flyer wouldn't care about. After half a month of peace, the Ensfran Kingdom's border guards suddenly moved out and attacked the Mana Magic Kingdom's border. Although the Mana Magic Kingdom reacted quickly and immediately organized a counterattack, after the two sides fought on the border for 3 months, the Mana Magic Kingdom began to show signs of being defeated. This result surprised many people. Because from a normal point of view, the Mana Magic Kingdom should be stronger than the Ensfran Kingdom by quite a bit. Perhaps the Ensfran Kingdom would gain a bit of an advantage, but if they kept fighting, they wouldn't be able to beat the Mana Magic Kingdom. But the fact was that the Mana Magic Kingdom gradually couldn't hold on, and after 4 months of fighting, they retreated for the first time, giving the magic crystal mine that they were fighting over to the Ensfran Kingdom. The Ensfran Kingdom didn't take this chance to expand their gains and chose to negotiate with the Mana Magic Kingdom. In the end, the Mana Magic Kingdom paid a certain amount of compensation to the Ensfran Kingdom and both sides declared a ceasefire. This short war created quite a bit of discussion in the signs. Everyone was very curious why the Mana Magic Kingdom couldn't beat the Ensfran Kingdom in this stalemate. After all, other than New Flyer, the other countries had the same amount of military magic machines, so there shouldn't be that much of a difference in their military strength. After careful analysis, they gradually came to a unified conclusion. Chapter 1185. Duke Nasasis glared at Count Joshian, who had the same dark look on his face. If he could kill with his eyes, he definitely wouldn't mind killing Count Joshian 10 times. If it wasn't for the fact that the logistics department this fellow was in charge of couldn't meet the needs of the frontline troops, how could he have been defeated on the battlefield? In the end, the kingdom had to sign a shameful peace treaty with the Ensfelan kingdom? Count Joshian could naturally feel the hatred in Duke Nasasis' eyes, but he could only remain silent with a bitter look on his face. As the logistics manager of the Mana Magic Kingdom's army, Not being able to guarantee the supplies of the frontline troops was a responsibility that he couldn't escape from, so he couldn't refute it. But this time, he really couldn't do anything. No one would have thought that New Flyer's withdrawal from the Mana Magic Kingdom would have such a large effect on the Mana Magic Kingdom. It far surpassed his expectations and everyone's expectations. The main reason why the kingdom didn't benefit from the war with the Ensfelin kingdom was because of the logistical problems. There were many reasons for the logistical problems. Let's give a simple example. After the war began, in order to transport large amounts of supplies to the front lines, the Mana Magic Kingdom's roads could be said to be in a state of overload. This kind of overload naturally created all kinds of problems. For example, there was a road that was damaged and seriously affected the transport speed. For example, there was a bridge that collapsed in the middle, causing 2 large transport magic cars to fall into the river and blocking several transport convoys. For example, in the transport fleet of the logistics department, there were quite a few transport magic cars that had malfunctioned during transport. However, because they lost the Frestec Chamber of Commerce's technicians, the malfunctions couldn't be solved at all. Even because of New Flyer's withdrawal, these transport magic cars that came from New Flyer couldn't find any suitable parts to repair. For example, and this was only the problem of logistics and transportation. In terms of logistics, because of New Flyer's withdrawal, there were large problems. For example, the cotton garment factory that was responsible for the supply of winter jackets for the frontline troops was mainly a cooperative venture between the Mana Magic Kingdom and the Armani Chamber of Commerce. On the surface, New Flyer's withdrawal did not seem to have anything to do with this cotton clothing factory. However, in the actual production process, this kind of influence was reflected in all aspects. The most obvious one was the lack of New Flyer's maintenance on the production magic machines of the cotton clothing factory, so there were different degrees of failures. This greatly decreased the efficiency of the production and finally affected the quantity and quality of the cotton clothing for the frontline troop. But this time, the war between the two sides had lasted for almost the entire winter. Whether the soldiers had enough cotton clothing and equipment would naturally greatly affect their combat effectiveness. In addition, from the various military magic machines equipped by the Mana Magic Kingdom to the canned vegetables that the soldiers had to eat every day, all of them had different degrees of shortages. Even if Joshua Count could solve the transportation problem, there was nothing he could do about the production problem. He could make the frontline troops last for 4 months before declaring that they couldn't resist anymore, which was already a large amount of effort, so how could he have any thoughts of avoiding this responsibility? However, Duke Nasasis, who was in charge of leading the army and was under a large amount of pressure because of the defeat, definitely wouldn't care about this. The current king of the Mana Magic Kingdom, who was also the only great magician among the Sign's leaders, Constantine lowered his head to look at the angry Duke Nasasis and Count Joshua, who had a bitter smile on his face, feeling a headache coming on. As the king who was in charge of the situation, he was very clear that the main reason for the benefits of this war with the Ensfran kingdom was in terms of logistics. However, the logistical problems could not be blamed on Count Josian, because in the past few months, other than the logistical problems from the army headquarters, there were also many problems related to the Mana Magic Kingdom's economy, so he didn't have a single day of peace. Just now, the kingdom's agriculture department had sent another report. According to the statistics of the agriculture department, the kingdom needed to buy at least 3,000 agricultural magic machines to barely meet the needs of next year's spring plowing. However, New Flyer had already withdrawn from the Mana Magic Kingdom, so the Mana Magic Kingdom had lost one of their main channels to buy agricultural magic machines. Although in the past few years, because New Flyer had released a large amount of technology, many companies other than New Flyer had grasped the method to make large magic machines, including most of the agricultural magic machines, Compared to the Xinfei brand agricultural magic machines, the agricultural magic machines made by the other companies were far inferior in terms of quality and stability. They couldn't replace the role of the Xinfei brand agricultural magic machines at all. Moreover, because New Flyer announced that they were withdrawing from the Mana Magic Kingdom, the other companies immediately raised their prices. They increased the price of the agricultural magic machines that had been kept very low by several times, making the agriculture department complain. It also made the agriculture department's budget for agriculture in the kingdom increase by 2 times. However, this wasn't the most important problem. There were alternatives to the agricultural magic machines other than the New Flyer, but the other thing that was deeply related to farming, fertilizer, couldn't be replaced. Only the Moon Shadow Tribe could make it. Properly speaking, the Moon Shadow Tribe was the Moon Shadow Tribe and the New Flyer was the New Flyer. New Flyer withdrawing from the Mana Magic Kingdom shouldn't be related to the Moon Shadow Tribe at all. But after New Flyer announced that they were withdrawing from the Mana Magic Kingdom, the Moon Shadow Chamber of Commerce, that was the main production company of the Moon Shadow Tribe, also announced that the attitude of the Mana Magic Kingdom towards New Flyer showed the bigotry and dishonesty of the Mana Magic Kingdom. This was the action that the elves despised the most, so the Moon Shadow Tribe had decided to cut off all relations with the Mana Magic Kingdom. Naturally, they wouldn't sell fertilizer to the Mana Magic Kingdom. After the Moon Shadow Tribe made this announcement, the Nightsong Tribe, the Azhara Tribe, and the other elf tribes that had appeared in recent years also made announcements, showing the same attitude as the Moon Shadow Tribe. After the elves showed their stance, a bunch of dwarf tribes and beastmen tribes also joined in the fun, showing that they didn't trust the Mana Magic Kingdom. They said that they refused to have any dealings with this dishonest human kingdom, so they cut off all trade with the Mana Magic Kingdom. Of course, other than the fertilizer, the Mana Magic Kingdom didn't have much demand for other races' products, so it didn't affect them that much. But the human companies that followed the trend of withdrawing had a large impact on the Mana Magic Kingdom. It made the magic machine industry that had been developing collapse, and even the other industries in the Mana Magic Kingdom were greatly affected. In the past few months, the Mana Magic Kingdom was filled with resentment and the situation had become very unstable. Every time he received similar news, King Constantine's heart would be filled with regret. The wave of opposition that caused the New Flyer to withdraw from the Mana Magic Kingdom was, in fact, related to him as the king. In fact, the reason why there was such a wave of opposition and even a large-scale demonstration was because the Mana Magic Kingdom's higher-ups deliberately condoned it. There were even some high-ranking nobles behind the scenes. The reason for this was because there were some voices in the Mana Magic Kingdom that opposed the New Flyer, mainly from the Sorcerers Guild. The second reason was that the Mana Magic Kingdom hoped to use this to express their attitude to the New Flyer and fight for more initiative in the cooperation between the two sides. However, King Constantine and the other higher-ups of the Mana Magic Kingdom didn't expect that the New Flyer's reaction would be so decisive. They actually directly announced their withdrawal. This was something that the Mana Magic Kingdom didn't expect. But even if King Constantine personally came forward and wanted to renegotiate with the New Flyer, he was still firmly rejected by Sui. He didn't even have the slightest chance to explain. Now that the New Flyer had withdrawn from the Mana Magic Kingdom for nearly half a year, the huge impact of this matter began to manifest little by little. Then, the entire Mana Magic Kingdom fell into a difficult situation. This time, the war with the Ensfran Kingdom had a huge impact on the surface, but compared to the impact that the entire Mana Magic Kingdom had received, it was only the tip of the iceberg. Nasasis, you don't have to blame Jothian too much. Thinking of this, Constantine waved his hand with a tired face and comforted Duke Nasasis. Jothian has done his best, but with all kinds of problems erupting, he really can't do anything. Duke Nasasis glared. If he can't solve it, then it's his fault. I don't care how many problems there are, but since he's the logistics manager, it's his responsibility to solve these problems. If he can't, then we'll change people." A trace of anger flashed in Count Jothian's eyes. This Duke Narcissus never had the same political views as him. It seemed like he was planning on using this chance to kick him out of his current position. When he was about to refute, King Constantine looked at him and used his eyes to stop him. "Narcissus, I've said it before. The main responsibility for this loss doesn't lie with the logistics department, and it doesn't lie with your soldiers on the front lines." Duke Narcissus was stunned. If the responsibility wasn't with the logistics department or the front lines, then who was it with? "Your Majesty, I—" As soon as Duke Narcissus spoke, he suddenly felt his eyes darken. There were sounds of shock and panic that filled the hall. "What is going on?" King Constantine's calm voice sounded. Your Majesty, it's because the magic crystals for the magic crystal lamps have been used up." A servant's panicked voice came from the corner of the hall. "Then why aren't you making it up?" King Constantine angrily said. "But the standard magic crystals in the royal palace have already been used up." The servant's voice became even more panicked. King Constantine was truly angry this time. "You knew it was going to be used up, so why didn't you make it up earlier?" "Your Majesty, that standard magic crystals can't be bought in the kingdom anymore." "How could it not be bought?" King Constantine had only reprimanded half a sentence when he suddenly thought of something. Although New Flyer didn't have many products other than the military magic machines, there was one thing that didn't stand out, but was very important that was produced by New Flyer. That was the standard magic crystals that all magic machines used. Thinking of this, King Constantine fell into silence. For a while, there was only the heavy breathing of King Constantine's group of 3 left in the dark hall, but it was unknown what the 3 of them were thinking. Chapter 1186. A letter from the Red Cloud Chamber of Commerce arrived in Su Yi's hands. Properly speaking, for an official letter from another company, it wouldn't be sent to Su Yi's hands. Although he was the New Flyer's chairman, he didn't care about the New Flyer's business anymore. This kind of letter was usually given to the managers of the company to deal with. Even the CEO Grius wouldn't be disturbed. But this time, because behind the Red Cloud Chamber of Commerce was the continent's Sorcerers' Guild, his subordinates didn't dare deal with it. So they sent it to Su Yi's hands. However, Su Yi only looked over the contents of the letter before throwing it to the side, not caring about it at all. This letter came from the Red Cloud Chamber of Commerce. It seemed like it represented the Sorcerers' Guild, but it was actually expressing the intentions of the Mana Magic Kingdom to Su Yi. Because the New Flyer had announced that they would withdraw from the Mana Magic Kingdom, if the Mana Magic Kingdom contacted the New Flyer, they would definitely ignore them. So it was normal for the Sorcerers' Guild, the most important supporter of the Mana Magic Kingdom, to convey this message. In this letter, the Red Cloud Chamber of Commerce only mentioned one thing. They hoped that they could increase their cooperation with the New Flyer in terms of agricultural magic machines, as well as wanting to buy more high-end agricultural magic machine technology from the New Flyer. They also expressed that they were willing to pay a sufficient price for this. At first glance, this letter seemed very normal. There were at least 800 companies that wanted to cooperate with the New Flyer, so it wasn't strange for the Red Cloud Chamber of Commerce to appear. But in reality, Su Yi was very clear that the Red Cloud Chamber of Commerce, or rather the Sorcerers' Guild, was just standing up for the Mana Magic Kingdom. Behind the Red Cloud Chamber of Commerce was the Sorcerers' Guild, and the Sorcerers' Guild didn't have that much land, so why did they care about agricultural magic machines? Of course, it was for the Mana Magic Kingdom. Su Yi knew very well that in a month's time, it would be spring plowing time for most of the countries on the signs. After the Mana Magic Kingdom lost the support and participation of the New Flyer, there was a huge gap in this area, and it was very difficult to fill it. Therefore, it was bound to greatly affect the upcoming spring plowing. Now, the Mana Magic Kingdom wanted to solve the problem through their relationship with the Sorcerers Guild. At the same time, they also expressed their intention to reconcile with the new flyer. However, Sui didn't care at all, nor did he go back on his words. He only said that he would let the new flyer return to the Mana Magic Kingdom in a few months. As for how to deal with the Mana Magic Kingdom, although Sui had explained a bit to Freya, he didn't explain everything clearly. In fact, the reason why he had such a strong reaction to the wave of opposition to the new flyer in the Mana Magic Kingdom, as well as ignoring the fact that the Kandla Empire and the Lampari Kingdom were secretly developing military magic machines, was indeed intentional. Announcing his withdrawal from the Mana Magic Kingdom with great fanfare, 1. was to show his strong attitude towards the Mana Magic Kingdom. 2. He already had this plan, but the Mana Magic Kingdom just happened to bump into him. Now that the new flyer had withdrawn from the Mana Magic Kingdom, he believed that everyone could clearly see the large impact this matter had on the Mana Magic Kingdom. Through this matter, the other countries on the continent would have a deeper and more intuitive understanding of the development of their own magic industry. It wouldn't be like the previous years, where no matter how hard the new flyer tried to help them, they didn't pay attention to it at all, resulting in their slow development. The Mana Magic Kingdom could be said to be an example that Sui deliberately made. And now, in less than half a year, the Mana Magic Kingdom had suffered a great loss in a short war with the Ensfran Kingdom, setting a perfect example for all the other countries. As for indulging the Kandla Empire and the Lampari Kingdom, it was indeed what he had explained to Freya, because it was impossible to suppress the ambitions of the other countries on the continent forever, so it was better not to suppress them. Sui never intended to dominate this world. He didn't have this ambition, and he didn't have this interest. But even if he didn't want to, there were people who wanted to. All the countries on the signs hoped that they could unify the continent and become one of the only great empires in history. Sui couldn't cut off their ambitions, so he could only choose to let nature take its course. He had already helped the continent obtain a period of 10 years of peaceful development. As for what happened after that, he couldn't care less and was too lazy to care. What's more, war had always been a catalyst for the explosion of technology. Earth had experienced 2 world wars, which meant that it had experienced 2 technological explosions. Sui couldn't guarantee that the world wouldn't experience a technological explosion after the war, but he was sure that if there was a chance to make progress in the research of military magic machines, most countries on the continent wouldn't be stingy with their investment in magic science research. And this was the real reason why Sui told Freya that he wanted to be more selfish in the future. If the major countries were allowed to develop military magic machines, it was bound to make the situation on the signs unstable, which would bring turmoil and even disaster to the people on the continent. However, Sui wasn't a saint, nor was he a god. He couldn't live forever, and it was impossible for New Flyer to maintain absolute power over other countries. So he could only slightly loosen the restrictions while he still had the ability to control it. He wasn't sure what would happen next, but he would still protect the rights of most civilians on the continent as much as possible. This was the only thing he could guarantee, and the only thing he could do. Compared to that, the situation on the Demon Cloud continent is much simpler. Suyi's gaze moved away from the letter and turned to the west. Compared to the situation on the signs that had long been carved up by various countries, the Demon Cloud continent was far worse than the signs in terms of civilization. Plus, the ones who had been in a dominant position before were the very backward goblins, so it was actually much easier to deal with than the signs. The Frestek Chamber of Commerce had started developing the Demon Cloud continent 10 years ago. Now that they had invested in it over the years, With the powerful battle strength of the Frestec Chamber of Commerce's guards, they had already beaten the gnomes to a pulp. They had opened up a very wide area on the Demon Cloud continent. Compared to the New Flyer, the indigenous races on the Demon Cloud continent couldn't even resist the goblins, so it was naturally impossible for them to resist the New Flyer. And compared to the goblins who only brought destruction, the New Flyer brought these indigenous races a better life and more far-reaching development prospects. As a result, the New Flyer obtained the full support of almost all the indigenous races on the Demon Cloud continent. It held all the rights in the ruling area and could do whatever it wanted. Of course, the New Flyers, doing whatever it wanted, was in fact just to develop the magic industry on the Demon Cloud continent and take root there. Due to the absolute rule of the New Flyer and the absolute support of the indigenous races, the New Flyer's development on the Demon Cloud continent far exceeded that of the Signs. In just more than 10 years, the New Flyer had even built a magic industry system on the Demon Cloud continent that was as perfect as the Signs. It could be said that the speed was amazing, and although the civilization on the Demon Cloud continent was backward, the resources were not worse than those on the Signs. Therefore, after the New Flyer took root, it could rely on the rich local resources to become self-sufficient. If a few years ago, the New Flyer still needed to continuously transport a large number of materials from the Signs to the Demon Cloud continent for support, then in recent years, the Demon Cloud continent was able to continuously transport a large number of resources to the New Flyer on the Signs. It could be said that the New Flyer's investment on the Demon Cloud continent had already received extremely rich returns. And it was precisely because the New Flyer had already obtained a strong foundation on the Demon Cloud continent that Sue made the choice to let go of the Signs. When there was another equally vast land that could make it easier for him to realize his dreams, then being selfish and not interfering with the affairs of the Signs became a reasonable choice. As for what the Signs would become, he could just watch coldly from the sidelines. Of course, the premise is that I still have enough power in my hands. Sue narrowed his eyes and thought, then turned and left the private manor. Half an hour later, he appeared in a barren mountain to the north of the New Flight Commerce main base. From the top and the surroundings of this barren mountain, there was nothing strange about it. It was no different from any other barren mountain. But if one walked over personally, they would find that the outside of this barren mountain was shrouded in a huge magic shield. At the same time, this magic shield also had an illusion attribute, covering all the food inside. This special magic shield was, of course, slightly modified from the magic shield unique to the Elven clan. It could almost perfectly block all external peeping. If one wanted to enter this magic shield, one had to have super strong strength and be able to directly break it. But this was impossible because this magic shield was able to defend against a super strong attack of more than 100,000 watts. It was simply impossible for an individual to achieve this level of attack. Or, one had to master a special method to enter this magic shield, which could also be called a string of magic codes, to be able to enter smoothly. And only Sue and a few higher-ups of the New Flyer could master the magic codes. Even the ordinary staff inside did not know about it. One had to know that without permission, the ordinary staff could not even enter and leave at will. This showed how strict the security measures were. But when Sue went through several procedures and finally entered the magic shield, he saw a towering thing in the valley. It was several stories high and looked like a huge warhead. Once again, he was sure that it was reasonable to use such strict security measures. Chapter 1187. 11 years ago, the New Flyer's guards and the Kingdom of Ruhr's army had defeated the Kanla Empire and the Mala Empire's army on the Terra Plains in the central province of the Kanla Empire. They had crushed the hopes of the two empires in one fell swoop and forced the two empires to sign an armistice. In that battle, what had played a decisive role was the attack of the New Flyers' magic airship squadron. With just a single attack, it had flattened a mountain and even seriously damaged the ground in a radius of several miles. It could be seen just how terrifying it was, and it was because he had personally witnessed the attack of the New Flyers' magic airship squadron that the two empires had lost their will to resist and agreed to Su Yi's request for an armistice. It wasn't exaggerated to say that this attack had completely changed the situation of the signs. It had also established the peace of the signs for the past 11 years, so it couldn't be ignored. The one who had released that attack was the New Flyers' magic airship squadron, and the one who had released that terrifying attack was the predecessor of the giant warhead in front of him, the magic spatial chain collapse seeker bomb. 11 years ago, the Frestec Chamber of Commerce had just touched upon this domain. So although the Frestec Chamber of Commerce had grasped this terrifying method of attack, they could only use it 3 times at most. If the will of the two empires hadn't been destroyed by this attack, the New Flyer would have been able to rely on conventional weapons to win. But now that 11 years had passed, the New Flyer had not only grasped this terrifying method of attack, they had even taken it a step further and made even more breakthroughs in their research. Su Yi looked up at this warhead that looked very terrifying, and he couldn't help feeling a bit shocked. He had never thought that a world dominated by magic could produce such a terrifying weapon whose power was almost comparable to a nuclear bomb on Earth. Yes, this weapon named Magic Nuclear Fission Warhead wasn't just similar to a nuclear bomb from Earth. Sir Chairman, regarding the detonation test of the new Magic Nuclear Warhead, we already have a preliminary plan. Please take a look. Ramasia, one of the directors of the Military Magic Machine R&D Department of the Magic Research Institute of New Flying Chamber of Commerce, handed a proposal to Su Yi. Su Yi watched as he explained. According to the plan, we will transport the warhead to an island 700 kilometers away from here in 3 days for a secret detonation test. In order to keep it a secret, this time we hope to first transport the warhead to the Black Rice port, then set off from there and make a detour before arriving at the destination. At the same time, I hope that Sir Chairman can send a magic airship team with us, not only to ensure our safety, but also to warn us ahead of time. That's not a problem. Su Yi agreed and gave the plan back to Ramasia after looking it over. He said with a smile, "Actually, you don't need to be this nervous. Even if the secret was leaked, it wouldn't matter." Ramasia looked at Su Yi with a look of surprise. Before this, Sir Chairman had always kept their department a secret and didn't allow any information to be leaked. He even specially opened up this valley and hid it with a magic illusion shield. But now, he suddenly acted like he didn't care at all. This change was just too big. Seeing the doubt in Ramasia's heart, Su Yi didn't explain to him. He looked around and changed the topic. As for the side effects of the magic core, has there been any progress recently? The so-called magic core energy was actually a new technology that the Magic Research Institute of New Flying Chamber of Commerce had accidentally discovered 16 years ago. To be specific, they found that because the magic elements had different attributes, there would be differences within them. After a long period of research, they found that the magic elements were actually made of smaller particles. These particles revolved around the core of the magic elements in different ways, showing different attributes. This characteristic could be said to be very similar to the atomic theory of Earth. But of course, it was still different. Strictly speaking, the particles of the magic elements didn't have a physical body, and were just a manifestation of energy in space. Under normal circumstances, it was difficult to interfere with them. The reason why magicians could use all kinds of magic was because magicians cultivated and raised their spiritual energy. Then they sent out brain waves of different frequencies, which was known as magic power on the Signs continent, to condense magic elemental energy. Finally, they used the magic elemental energy to form a material form, using this magic elemental energy to form various kinds of magic. When the Magic Research Institute of New Flying Chamber of Commerce placed the research results in front of Sui, he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He had always thought that the civilization of signs was extremely backward compared to that of Earth, so he always had a sense of superiority in his heart and always looked at the people of this world with a superior attitude. However, the results of this research told Sui a shocking fact. The people of this world were extremely backward in terms of science and technology, but after tens of thousands of years of magic research, they had mastered the way of using energy that was far beyond that of Earth's technology. It could even be said that they had directly touched on the essence of energy. As for the so-called magic elements, Sui had always been unable to fully understand them. This was because these energy particles didn't have any physical form, but could be condensed through magic to form all kinds of magic. They could even be controlled at will, which was already incredible to Sui. However, this research showed a fact that surprised Sui even more, and that was that the magic elements were actually the energy of the void. They were originally the most basic energy particles that built this world, and could be said to be everywhere and endless. Magic was, in fact, a way to directly extract the energy of the void and use it. This ability was far from the level of science and technology on Earth, but the seemingly backward signs could easily use it. However, what really made Sui speechless was that the people of signs didn't even realize this problem. Because of the lack of a proper scientific concept, to the people of signs, magic was just like the legendary witchcraft on Earth. Only a few people could master it, and it had magical effects, but no one knew the true principles behind it. Therefore, even though the people of signs didn't know how the magic civilization developed in the beginning, and almost immediately had the most powerful and most potential way of using energy, they had always deviated from the path and only focused on the most meaningless aspect of the way of using energy in Sui's opinion, the destructive power. Of course, the people of signs couldn't be blamed for this. They didn't know how they inadvertently mastered magic, and under the circumstances where they didn't have a basic theory, they naturally focused on the most magical aspect, which naturally led to the development of the way it was now. Sui's current mission was to use the scientific view of magic that he had constructed to study magic thoroughly from its roots, so that magic would no longer be a mysterious thing that a lot of mages didn't know how to use. It would become a truly powerful weapon in the hands of people in this world. The energy of the magic core was an unexpected discovery during this research process. When the magic elements were disturbed by a certain high frequency of magic, there might be a temporary separation between the magic element's core and the external particles that represented the attributes of the magic element. This phenomenon was known as the magic core stopping, and during the process of the magic core stopping, it would explode with an abnormally terrifying amount of energy. When this happened for the first time, it was only a very small area where the magic nuclei stopped rotating, and it directly turned an entire research room into ashes. After many detailed studies, New Flyer finally understood the principle of this energy generation and was able to control the explosion of the magic core's energy at will. But the explosion of the magic core's energy had some side effect. One of the biggest effects was that after the magic core's energy exploded, it would cause the magic space within the explosion to be in a state of complete chaos for a long time, almost forming a completely isolated and sealed chaotic magic space. The chaotic state within this magic space was extremely serious, and even a mage like Sui, who was at the level of an archmage, couldn't enter at will. And if one wanted to eliminate this chaotic space without external interference, they could only let the surrounding magic space gradually digest it over a long period of time. But if they wanted to use external interference, they would have to pay a huge price, and it was also not a small risk. Therefore, New Flyer didn't actually conduct much practical research on the magic core's energy. Even if they did, they would choose to do it in a more remote place that wouldn't affect anything. If they continued to stay in the Academy of Magic to conduct experiments, it wouldn't be long before the entire Magic Research Institute of New Flying Chamber of Commerce could no longer stay. Sir Chairman, in this aspect, we still have some progress. Hearing Su Yi's question, Ramasia revealed a slightly self-satisfied smile. Through the statistical analysis of the space data after each magic core's energy explosion, we now have a basic grasp of the law within. Just last month, we already eliminated an abnormal space through the vibration of a specific magical element. That's not bad. Su Yi nodded his head in approval. If we can eliminate the side effects in time every time, then this thing can be considered to be truly under our control. Yes, Ramasia responded. She hesitated for a moment, but then revealed a trace of doubt. But we've discovered a problem in our research. Chapter 1188. What's the problem? Su Yi looked at Ramasia with interest. Scientific research was never afraid of finding a problem, it was afraid that there would be no problem. Ramasia was silent for a moment, then pointed to the magic nuclear warhead standing tall in the distance, and said with some hesitation, Sir Chairman, guess, if this warhead is officially detonated, how large of an area can it destroy? I should be asking you this. If you ask me, how should I answer? Su Yi asked in return, somewhat amused. Ramasia shook his head, not knowing whether to deny Su Yi's statement or not knowing how to answer. After another moment of silence he sighed. If this warhead is detonated here, I'm afraid the entire valley will be turned into ashes, and no one will be able to escape. Ramasia glanced at Su Yi, paused, and then added, perhaps only archmages like Sir Chairman and Mentor Carmilla will have a chance to survive. Others won't have the slightest chance of survival. This valley was located about 5 kilometers to the north and west of the New Flight Commerce main base, and covered an area of about 60 hectares. If a detonation here could turn the entire valley into ashes, it meant that the explosion of this magic nuclear warhead was close to 1 square kilometer. Such terrifying power was even comparable to the atomic bombs that were first developed on Earth. And if no measures were taken to deal with the chaotic magic space left behind, this area could only be untouchable for a long time, and would completely become a land of death. Compared to the extremely serious effects of residual nuclear radiation after an atomic bomb explosion, this magic nuclear warhead was even more terrifying. Hearing Ramasia's meaning, Su Yi's expression became serious. What are you trying to say? I'm trying to say. Ramasia shook his head and smiled bitterly. Sir Chairman, did we create a terrifying monster with our own hands? Su Yi didn't answer this question, but was silent for a moment, and then pointed to himself. Ramasia, if I use my full strength, how much damage do you think I can cause in an instant? Ramasia froze for a moment, then replied without hesitation, with your current strength, the destructive power you cause will only be more terrifying than this magic nuclear warhead. That's right. Su Yi smiled again. Look, no matter how terrifying the power of this warhead is, it's only comparable to the destructive power of an archmage, or even slightly inferior. Magisters have existed on this continent for tens of thousands of years. What are you afraid of? But, at most, there are only a few dozen magisters. As for this magic nuclear warhead, as long as the experiment is successful, we can make hundreds or even thousands of them. That's exactly what I need, Su Yi said seriously. I want to drive the mages out of the battlefield, and even archmages are no exception. What I'm relying on is power that surpasses that of an archmage. These magic nuclear warheads are just enough to meet my requirement. As for your concerns, I can understand. It's just that in Ramasia, it's never the power or the weapons themselves that cause disasters, but the people who wield these powers and weapons. Do you understand what I mean? Ramasia was silent for a while, then turned to look at the magic nuclear warhead and slowly nodded, seeming to accept Su Yi's words. However, from the expression on his face, he still hadn't completely thought it through. Su Yi wasn't surprised that he would have such a reaction. The magic nuclear warhead was such a terrifying thing that could rival an archmage, but now it was in the hands of ordinary people. Of course, it would give rise to strange emotions in the hearts of ordinary people like Ramasia. In reality, only he, the person who understood the most, would have such emotions. On the contrary, the workers and ordinary researchers under him wouldn't think so much. Studying magic nuclear energy isn't just for magic nuclear warheads, nor is it just for weapons and war. Su Yi patted Ramasia's shoulder and comforted him. In reality, if magic nuclear energy is used for civilian use, it can play a greater role. Civilian use? Ramasia looked at Su Yi, puzzled. From the beginning, he had been asked to use magic nuclear energy on magic nuclear warheads, and had never considered civilian use. Sir Chairman, magic nuclear energy is too violent and difficult to release slowly. I'm afraid it won't work for civilian use, right? That's only for now. As long as we continue to study it in the future, I believe we will be able to freely control this power. Su Yi smiled. Ramasia nodded lightly, suddenly feeling much better. After telling Ramasia a few more things to pay attention to in the experiment, Su Yi left the valley. After walking out of the magic illusion shield, Su Yi looked back at the valley that didn't seem to have anything out of the ordinary on the outside, and slowly shook his head. After Ramasia left with the magic nuclear warhead, all the facilities here would be removed. The research on magic nuclear energy was very dangerous. It was not suitable to keep it next to the new flight commerce main base. Therefore, Su Yi had wanted to move it away for a long time. Taking advantage of this experiment, Su Yi planned to move the research department to a large island on the Endless Sea and use it as the new Flyer's Magic Nuclear Energy Research and Development Center. Turning his gaze to the new flight commerce main base in the distance, Su Yi fell into deep thought. Not only did he have to move the Magic Nuclear Energy Research Department, but he also had to move a series of important departments in New Flyer. However, this relocation didn't need to be so urgent. Or rather, it couldn't be too urgent. If there was news that New Flyer planned to withdraw from the signs, the entire mainland would fall into chaos. ####spring in the year 3815 of the continental calendar was as usual. When the warm wind blew across the mainland, all the countries on the mainland began their annual spring plowing. If it was several decades ago, almost everyone on the continent would participate in the spring plowing. This was because if they wanted to plant crops in the right season, it wasn't an important matter. Plowing, sowing, fertilizing, and other steps, each step required large amounts of people to participate. Usually, at this time, even the noblest king and those high and mighty nobles would take the initiative to walk down from the fields and put on a diligent farming posture to show that they valued the spring plowing. With low productivity, there was a serious lack of food production. Most people could only live in a state of famine all year round, so this was an inevitable custom. However, because of the appearance of the new flyer, it brought large amounts of agricultural magic machines, so the people of the signs didn't feel any urgency during the spring plowing. Whether it was plowing, sowing, or even fertilizing, there were agricultural magic machines that took care of it. The citizens who owned land only needed to pay a bit of money to hand these matters over to the agricultural companies, so they didn't need to care about anything. Moreover, there weren't many citizens who were willing to spend their precious time on spring plowing. After all, compared to working hard in the fields, it was better to work in a factory. The income of a single day was much higher than farming. In the signs before, farming was the destiny of most people, and there was no difference between them. But now, if the people who didn't farm weren't from the agricultural companies, they would be looked down upon by others. This was because only people who didn't have any skills would be reduced to farming, doing this kind of tiring work that didn't pay much. The magic machine industry developed in the signs, bringing countless job opportunities. For every person on the continent, as long as they had the heart, they could find a suitable job. If they didn't know anything, they could be the most basic assembly line workers. If they knew a bit about magic machines, they could become skilled workers with better treatment. If they had a bit of understanding of magic, they could enter the research department of the large companies. Perhaps with a flash of inspiration, they could bring a large profit to themselves and the company. As for those high and mighty mages, they would no longer be so arrogant as to wait for the basic guarantee from the Magic Union. They might even starve to death. Instead, they were very active in learning all kinds of new magical theories, working hard to grasp enough knowledge related to magic machines, and striving to become a famous high-level magic mechanical engineer. No one was willing to be idle, and no country was willing to be idle. However, the Mana Magic Kingdom wasn't idle, but it was completely because they were forced to. When the other countries on the continent were busy with spring plowing, the Mana Magic Kingdom wasn't an exception. But there was a large shortage of agricultural magic machines, so the Mana Magic Kingdom's agriculture department had no way to fill this gap. Even after April was almost over, there were still large amounts of land in the kingdom that no one was farming. The citizens who had other jobs disdained the bit of income from farming, and the farmers who didn't have jobs found that without the help of the agricultural magic machines, they had already forgotten how to farm. The Mana Magic Kingdom's agriculture department was naturally very worried about this situation because they were very clear that without enough food, there would be no peace in the kingdom. But the agriculture department couldn't force people to work. Even if they took various measures, they couldn't solve the problem. While the agriculture department and the kingdom's parliament were worried about the spring plowing, there was a new problem that came to the Mana Magic Kingdom. At the end of April, large-scale riots broke out in the 3 provinces of the Mana Magic Kingdom. The rioters directly attacked the local government, shouting for the kingdom to give them the right to work. The reason was very simple, it was because a large group of people had lost their jobs. Chapter 1189. With the withdrawal of New Flyer, as time passed, the effects became more and more serious. At first, only the shops and mines related to New Flyer closed. Since they were taken over by the Mana Magic Kingdom, who had prepared ahead of time, the effects weren't that big. But with the withdrawal of the other races and the withdrawal of many companies from other countries, most of the factories that had sprung up in the Mana Magic Kingdom closed down. Even if the Mana Magic Kingdom had made a lot of preparations, letting the companies of the kingdom take over while also recruiting companies from other countries to invest, after losing the investment of New Flyer and the large companies related to New Flyer, the magic machine industry of the Mana Magic Kingdom was seriously damaged and the related industries were affected to varying degrees. The one that was affected the most and the one that was the most obvious was the household magic machine industry. With New Flyer and the other companies withdrawing, the Mana Magic Kingdom couldn't even produce the most basic magic fan. If they didn't lack this component, they lacked that component. The Mana Magic Kingdom wanted to rely on their own strength to improve this system, but even though these things seemed simple, it would take a long time to accumulate technology, especially the accumulation of related talents. So no matter how hard the Mana Magic Kingdom worked, it was hard to fill these gaps. Moreover, with the effects of New Flyer withdrawing, the various companies related to the magic machine industry in the Mana Magic Kingdom found it hard to import components from other countries. At the same time, because New Flyer had given the Mana Magic Kingdom a bad faith label, the products of the Mana Magic Kingdom companies became products that couldn't be trusted in the eyes of most people on the continent. This view wasn't just limited to magic machines, rather it was printed on all the products of the Mana Magic Kingdom. Even the traditional products of the Mana Magic Kingdom that had close to 1,000 years of history and were famous on the continent were affected by this, and their sales fell. Like this, the companies of the Mana Magic Kingdom found it hard to produce, and it was even harder to sell. Naturally, they couldn't continue and they all closed down. As a result, the large number of workers employed by these companies lost their jobs because of this. If this was several decades ago, or even 10 years ago, the word unemployment would be a very new word for most people in the Mana Magic Kingdom. This was because most people didn't have a proper job to begin with. They were all farmers who relied on the land to survive, so how could they lose their jobs? But in the recent 10 years, with the promotion of the magic machine industry in the signs by New Flyer, the various companies related to the magic machine industry of the Mana Magic Kingdom had these people who only knew how to work in the fields and entered the factories. They obtained jobs that gave them jobs that far surpassed their previous jobs of time and led better lives than before. But now they were unemployed. There was a saying on Earth, it was easy to go from frugality to extravagance, but hard to go from extravagance to frugality. The people of the Mana Magic Kingdom had already gotten used to their new life through these jobs, but now because of unemployment, they lost their income and suddenly lost the foundation to maintain a good life. Of course, they weren't willing to go back to the fields and work hard. Even if they were willing, because most of the fields in the kingdom were monopolized by the professional companies under the nobles, there was no place for them to get involved. Therefore, these people lost almost all of their sources of income in an instant. So the turmoil naturally broke out. At first, it was only 3 provinces that were involved in large-scale unrest. But as the Mana Magic Kingdom didn't come up with effective solutions, the scope of the turmoil became bigger and bigger. Soon, it affected more than half of the territory. It could be said that the area affected by the wave of opposition to the Frestec Chamber of Commerce was as large as the area affected by the current wave, or even surpassing it. The Mana Magic Kingdom was originally stable and prosperous, but in the blink of an eye, it became incomparably turbulent. When the newspapers reported these events, many of them clearly pointed out that the reason why the Mana Magic Kingdom became like this was because of the New Flyer's withdrawal. There were even some tabloids that said that the reason why the Mana Magic Kingdom had such large-scale chaos was because of the Frestec Chamber of Commerce behind the scenes. New Flyer didn't give any official response to this accusation. But in private, serves them right, President Cruz snorted with disdain. Who told these guys not to cooperate with you honestly, but instead, they wanted to play tricks. Now that they've tasted the consequences, it's completely their own fault. Isn't that right, Sui? Sui shook his head, feeling a little funny. In fact, he chose to have the New Flyer withdraw from the Mana Magic Kingdom because he had other deeper considerations. It was just that the Mana Magic Kingdom just happened to hit the head of the spear. It wasn't wrong to say that the Mana Magic Kingdom deserved it. After all, if they didn't deliberately delay and play tricks in private, and even created a wave of opposition to negotiate with the New Flyer, Sui wouldn't have directly made this decision. But President Cruz put on such a gloating and indignant expression, it was really too much of an act. After scolding the Mana Magic Kingdom, President Cruz coughed and asked, "Speaking of which, Sui, do you really plan to completely ignore the Mana Magic Kingdom? If you are willing to let go now, the Mana Magic Kingdom will definitely be willing to agree to any conditions." Sui glanced at him. "Our Chamber of Commerce has publicly announced to everyone that we will withdraw from the Mana Magic Kingdom. How can we go back on our words?" President Cruz's mouth twitched, with a look of disapproval. The so-called public announcements in the business world were the same as the words from the mouths of those big political figures. They were no different from farts. As long as there were enough benefits, these things could be overturned at any time, and no one would find it strange. If the New Flyer re-entered the Mana Magic Kingdom in the name of civilian rescue, then it wouldn't be considered a violation of the previous announcement. After that, the Mana Magic Kingdom would naturally make a statement and invite the new flyer back, and no one would be able to use this to criticize the new flyer. It was impossible that Sui didn't think of this solution, so why was he still insisting on his previous decision? Don't look at me. Since I have decided to withdraw, then I will withdraw. Sui saw through President Cruz's thoughts, so he deliberately explained. For your Amsterdam Chamber of Commerce, this is a good opportunity to take advantage of the situation and enter the Mana Magic Kingdom. Cruz, you can't miss this opportunity. President Cruz awkwardly smiled. I didn't think so. Don't forget, our Amsterdam Chamber of Commerce was the first to withdraw from the Mana Magic Kingdom after New Flyer. Sui smiled, thinking that although the Amsterdam Chamber of Commerce announced their withdrawal with New Flyer, they didn't say that they would permanently withdraw, nor did they say that they would withdraw completely. It was purely for show. If President Chris wasn't tempted, it would be strange if he had the idea of meddling in the Mana Magic Kingdom. Well, the matter of the Mana Magic Kingdom has nothing to do with me, so let's not waste time discussing it. Cruz, are your preparations ready? Sui asked. Hearing Sui ask about business, President Cruz's expression immediately became serious, and he nodded. Everything is ready, we can set off at any time. After a pause, he suddenly moved a little closer and asked with a smile, That? Sui, our people are ready, but I'm afraid we don't have enough ships. It's a bit troublesome to rely on your new flyer's fleet to transport. How about I just sell you a few ships? Sui smiled. Ha! Ha ha! If it's possible, that would be great. President Cruz dryly laughed twice, but didn't deny it at all. Sui laughed and shook his head. Then he took a document from the table next to him and threw it in front of President Cruz. Take a look. If you're satisfied, then sign it. President Cruz took it and found that it was a contract for the sale of large magic boat. Looking at it carefully, the number of large magic boats in this contract was actually as high as 10. President Cruz looked at Sui in surprise and joy. This. You. Could it be that you're planning on selling us 10 ships at once? Sui reached out his hand and flipped to the last page of the contract, pointing at the last signature. Sign your name if you want it, stop wasting words. President Cruz looked over it and didn't hesitate at all as he signed his name at the end. He had worked with Sui for close to 30 years, so he didn't doubt that Sui would set a trap in the contract. I can only give you 10 ships for now, there's no need to think about anything else. Sui took the other 2 contracts for President Cruz to sign. If you want them, perhaps you'll have more after our new shipyard is built. President Cruz had a smile as he nodded. 10 ships is enough for now. As for the future, of course the more the better. As long as you're willing to sell them, I'll take them all. In your dreams. Sui gave a snort. Even these 10 ships were taken from the Mala Empire, the Kanla Empire, and the Lampari Kingdom for you. Do you think there's that much? President Cruz's smile became bigger, as it was filled with eagerness. Sui, I've always remembered how you took care of our Amsterdam Chamber of Commerce. After going to the Demon Cloud continent this time, I will definitely have my subordinates go all out and definitely won't hold you back. Actually, the situation on the Demon Cloud continent is much simpler than signs and things are much easier, so there's nothing holding you back. Sui was silent for a bit before continuing. When I get there, I might make some changes based on the situation, so you should prepare yourself. President Cruz nodded in response. When he was about to speak, he was suddenly stunned as he looked at Sui with wide eyes. You're also going? Chapter 1190. It was a bit incredible and a bit ridiculous. New Flyer discovered the Demon Cloud continent more than 10 years ago. In the past 10 years, they have been constantly developing the Demon Cloud continent. Now, they have even controlled a vast area on the Demon Cloud continent and have taken root in it. But Sui, the president of New Flyer, has not been to the Demon Cloud continent even once. Seeing the surprise in President Cruz's eyes, Sui nodded and gave a soft hum. I should go and take a look. The Chamber of Commerce has invested so much in the Demon Cloud continent. As the president, if I don't go and take a look, it's really unreasonable. President Cruz shook his head. Suyi's reason sounded fine, but it still had nothing to do with his sudden decision to go to the Demon Cloud continent. What he wanted to hear was Suyi's real reason. The real reason is that the previous 10 years have been very important for the development of our Chamber of Commerce and the entire signs. I don't want anything to happen because of my absence. So you think it's okay to leave now? President Cruz asked. No problem. Really? President Cruz looked at Sui suspiciously. He didn't believe Suyi's explanation. It was true that New Flyer was in an important stage of development in the past 10 years. But it was too exaggerated to say that it was so important that Sui couldn't even leave signs. And even if this was true, the second half of Suyi's sentence was not true. The current situation in signs seemed very calm on the surface. Just like in the previous 10 years, everyone was busy developing. But President Cruz had heard about the turbulent waves in the dark. Take the Mana Magic Kingdom, which was now the focus of everyone's attention on the continent, for example. It was precisely because of the withdrawal of New Flyer that so many things happened. In the future, no matter how the situation in the Mana Magic Kingdom changed, it would be related to the New Flyer. At this time, Sui, the most important decision-maker of New Flyer, had left signs. This was not a good choice for New Flyer. President Cruz couldn't figure out why Sui chose this time to go to the Demon Cloud continent, but Sui made it clear that he didn't want to explain, so he was helpless. After a moment of silence, President Cruz shook off his doubts and turned his attention to another matter that had more to do with him. Sui, you just said that the 10 ships you gave me were taken from the 2 empires and the Lampuri kingdom. They're willing to agree. Doesn't that mean that they're slowing down their exploration of the sea and the new continent? Otherwise, they wouldn't give up the chance to equip themselves with another magic boat. Although they didn't say it clearly, based on their actions, it is indeed like this. Sui gave a certain answer. President Cruz was filled with doubts again. Why? Didn't they always want to participate in the exploration of the new continent? Why did they shrink back from such a good chance? It's very simple. It's because they feel that Signs is more worthy of their attention. Signs? President Cruz knit his brows to think, but he still couldn't figure it out. But seeing the taunting smile on Suyi's face, President Cruz had a bad feeling. After working with Sui for all these years, President Cruz naturally knew that Sui had a goal in his choice. But this time, since New Flyer announced their withdrawal from the Mana Magic Kingdom, President Cruz couldn't understand the series of things that Sui had done. Sui clearly had his own deep considerations. If he couldn't guess his true thoughts, it would hinder the development of the Amsterdam Chamber of Commerce in the future. But after thinking about it, President Cruz's heart suddenly relaxed. Why did he need to care about what Sui wanted to do? After all these years, could it be that he still didn't understand one thing? That was that as long as he hugged Suyi's thigh and followed his steps, he would always obtain the greatest benefits and never miss out. Although he didn't understand what Sui was thinking this time, since New Flyer suddenly decided to invest more in the Demon Cloud continent and even Sui was willing to go, what was there to hesitate about? He could just follow Sui to the Demon Cloud continent. Thinking of this, the doubt and worry on President Cruz's face disappeared. He gave a laugh and said, "The 2 empires and the Lampari kingdom are too short-sighted. They only know how to look at the signs all day, but they've forgotten that there isn't just one continent in this world. If they miss this chance, they will definitely regret it in the future." Sui gave a shrug, That's their matter, it's not related to me. ####. A month and a half later, a magic airship team of 5 magic airships was flying over the endless sea that was 6,000 kilometers away from the New Flight Commerce main base. Sui looked out the window at the boundless sea in the distance, and his heart was filled with emotions. When he was on Earth, because he often went on business trips, it was normal for him to take a plane. He would often cross the ocean to go abroad, so he had experienced flying over the sea more than once. However, after coming to this world, even if the magic airships were developed by him and he had taken them countless times, this was his first time taking a magic airship across the sea to another continent. It was no wonder President Cruz was surprised that he was suddenly preparing to head to the Demon Cloud continent. After all, he had many chances to go to the Demon Cloud continent in the past 10 years, but he had never gone. Now that the situation on the signs was a bit tense, he as the president of New Flyer suddenly decided to go to the Demon Cloud continent that was over 10,000 kilometers away. Anyone would be surprised if they heard this. For example, after Seveni received the news from Sui, she immediately contacted Sui and quickly asked him about Sui, wanting to know where Sui was going. But with Sui's casual and vague response, Seveni couldn't get anything out of him at all and had no other way. The 2 empires that received this news also sent people to contact the New Flyer. Although they didn't say it, it was clear that they were very concerned about Sui's sudden departure from Signs. When the New Flyer announced this matter through the Xinfei Daily, there were countless countries, powers, and individuals that came to ask about it. The various newspapers even made the news of Sui leaving the Signs continent and heading to the Demon Cloud continent as their headline. It could be seen just how big of an effect this matter had. When the New Flyer's fleet set off to the Demon Cloud continent, the envoys of countless countries and the reporters of the major newspapers all flocked over. The New Flyer also acted differently and announced their departure ceremony to the public. They invited large amounts of people to personally witness the departure of the New Flyer fleet and the magic airship. With countless people as witnesses, Sui boarded the magic airship and left Signs with the other teams sent by the New Flyer. Thinking of the lively scene back then, Sui couldn't help smiling. Even if he had boarded the magic airship in front of all these people and left the Signs continent, he was certain that there were countless people on the Signs continent who were still guessing in their hearts whether he had really left or not. Of course, these guesses were only temporary. After a while, if Sui didn't appear, the doubts in everyone's hearts would disappear. At that time, there would be some people who would make a move. Thinking of what happened half a month ago in the Mana Magic Kingdom, the smile on Sui's face became even deeper. Half a month ago, the Mana Magic Kingdom's internal strife became even more intense. There was a rebellion in one of the provinces and the provincial governor died in the rebellion. The new ruler of the province announced that they were leaving the Mana Magic Kingdom and were self-governing. When they announced their independence, the new ruler of the province publicly attacked the Mana Magic Kingdom's previous policies. He said that it was the foolish actions of the upper class of the kingdom that caused the New Flyer to withdraw from the Mana Magic Kingdom, causing the Mana Magic Kingdom to fall into chaos. So the new ruler said that he would lead the self-governing province to welcome the New Flyer. He hoped that the New Flyer and the other companies could return and help build a better home. Naturally, the New Flyer didn't express any views on this. Rather, there were several countries on the continent that publicly supported this statement, reprimanding the Mana Magic Kingdom's actions. These fellows, of course they wanted to see the world in chaos. And after such a serious incident broke out in the Mana Magic Kingdom, it added fuel to the fire of the originally chaotic situation. Before Sui left, according to the latest news, the Mana Magic Kingdom had stopped the rebellion and was prepared to quell this rebellion. Sui didn't have a chance to personally witness this battle, but he could guess that quelling this rebellion wouldn't be easy. Because of the previous policies of the Mana Magic Kingdom, it could be said that they had lost the hearts of the people. Moreover, it was obvious that many countries on the continent wanted to see the Mana Magic Kingdom fall into chaos. So at this time, there were probably many people who had already reached out. Of course, Sui had already decided to stay out of it and ignore it. Even if it was on a deeper level, the Mana Magic Kingdom's current situation was because of him deliberately. Even now, he suddenly announced to everyone that he was leaving the signs. This was also part of his plan. Of course, now that he had left the signs thousands of kilometers behind, even Sui wasn't sure what would happen after he left. Chapter 1191. After around half an hour, there was a large piece of land that appeared on the sea in front of the magic airship team. When they came close, they found that this was an incomparably large island. It was more than 10 times bigger than the other islands they saw on the way. Moreover, it was different from the small islands that were scattered across the endless sea. On this large island, there were many buildings, and there was even a small harbor built on the side, which was clearly a place that already had an owner. In the northeast corner of the island, there was a square that wasn't small. After the magic airship team flew over the large island, they landed on this square. Sui and the people with him came out of the magic airship, but they didn't see that familiar figure in the crowd outside. "Where's Akali?" Sui asked the vice manager of the New Flyers overseas branch, Doran, who was in charge of welcoming them. This large island was the overseas base that Akali chose to use to study the super space magic communication. Since she returned to the New Flight Commerce main base and recruited a group of new research assistants before bringing them here, half a year had passed in the blink of an eye. Because there wasn't any real super space magic communication in this half a year, Akali could only send back some information from the fleet that transported supplies each month, but she didn't leave this island at all. According to the information she sent back, after half a year of research, she had already solved most of the problems. She was about to create a super space magic communication station, which would allow real-time transmission of magic signals to the signs and the Demon Cloud continent. Of course, long before Akali brought people here, this overseas research base had already been prepared for 2 years. Otherwise, just the buildings on this island wouldn't have been built in half a year. And all the research before this had already been completed. Akali had led her research team here just for the final experiment. However, just the final experiment would take a large amount of time, effort, and money. In the past half a year, New Flyer had invested over 6 million gold coins worth of resources into the island. Manager Akali and a few dragon friends are doing the final stage of observation and debugging. Hearing Suyi's question, Deputy Director Doran carefully sized up the expression on Suyi's face and asked, "Do you need me to inform her that you're here, President? Up there?" Sui raised his head to look at the sky, but all he could see was clear skies. There was no sign of Akali at all. After thinking for a while, he shook his head and ordered, "No need, I'll go find her myself in a while. You can arrange the guests first." "Guests?" Doran looked behind Sui in surprise. There were several female elves who came out of the magic airship, and there were several fully armed male elves behind them, who looked like guards. It seemed that the guests Sui was talking about were them. Doran was a bit surprised. Although the last batch of rescue ships had told them that the president would personally come, they didn't mention that there would be elven guests. This overseas research base for the Frestek Chamber of Commerce should be considered a secret base. So why did Sir Chairman bring outsiders here now? Of course, Doran was doubtful, but he didn't show it on his face at all. He waved his hand and had several subordinates come over. After a bit of noise, the elves were first settled down under Doran's arrangements. Sui didn't listen to Doran's arrangements. After asking a few questions, he activated his magic and flew into the air. With Suyi's powerful magic, in the blink of an eye, he was already 1,000 meters above the ground. Looking down, the giant island had already become a small black dot. However, Sui didn't stop. He kept flying up while taking out a magic communicator from his chest, connecting to Akali's private communication band. Hello. Hello. President. You're here? From the magic communicator, there was Akali's intermittent voice that couldn't be considered clear at all. Sui frowned, but he wasn't surprised. Akali had already told him a long time ago that the magical signal transmission method was actually outdated, and there would be many limitations. For example, in such a high altitude, the density and operation of the magical elements in the space were different from below. Hence, the communication signal would be affected, and the quality of the communication would of course be affected. However, Sui didn't expect to rely on this to contact Akali. Instead, he focused on sensing the magical signal waves transmitted through the magic communicator and easily determined Akali's current location. The magic in his body activated again, and when Sui appeared again, he was already in the sky, far away from the ground. Apart from Akali, who was smiling unexpectedly, there were also a few large dragons in front of Sui. Hey, Mr. President, I was just about to get a dragon friend to pick you up. Akali expanded the magical shield that shrouded her body and enveloped Sui. The two of them could then talk to each other without any obstacles, just like when they were on the ground. You don't have to go through so much trouble. Sui shook his head and smiled at the dragons that were flying in circles in the sky. He asked, "What are you doing?" "We're currently testing the magic elemental fluctuations in this area and collecting data." Akali pointed at the dragons. "Look, they're all carrying a huge simulator on their back. They're relying on those things to collect data." Sui focused his gaze, and indeed saw that each dragon was carrying a large metal square box on their back. There were also oddly shaped tentacles that were combined with their massive bodies. They looked as strange as it could get. Seeing this scene, Sui couldn't help but twitch the corners of his mouth, and he felt like laughing. Be it in the fantasy literature on Earth, the science literature, or the legends of the various races, the dragons were all extremely terrifying creatures. They were born powerful, and were said to have a violent temper. In the eyes of almost every race, they could only represent destruction, and never had a good impression of them. However, these legendary dragons were now carrying these strange machines on their backs and flying in circles in the sky obediently according to Akali's instructions. If the people of the signs were to know about this, their impression of the new flyer would probably be even more terrifying. Seeing that Sui was sizing up the dragons with a strange expression, Akali misunderstood Sui's thoughts. She explained, "We have no choice. If we, the human mages, were to do it, it would be very difficult to get accurate data because the use of flying magic would disrupt the magical elements in the space itself. Hence, we could only let the dragons do it. They use their physical talents to fly, so there's no problem." Physical talents? Sui looked at the huge and bloated bodies of the dragons and thought to himself, "These guys don't fit the description of flying creatures at all. Also, they don't seem to flap their wings much in the process of flying, so how are they able to keep flying? Actually, there's no need for our dragon friends to work so hard. We can build the levitating device first, and then improve it while collecting data. The results might be even better than now," Sui said. "If possible, of course it would be great. But the levitating device still hasn't been tested, and my research has already reached this stage. You can't just let us stay here and do nothing, right?" Akali's tone carried a trace of complaint. Sui smiled slightly. "The aviation department is also working very hard. Look, I brought you the levitating device this time." Akali's eyes immediately lit up. "It's done? That's great. Where is it? I want to test it immediately. I can't wait." "Calm down." Sui pressed her down. "The things have already been delivered, so there's no need to rush. Go call your dragon friends back first. With the levitating device, they won't have to work so hard. Okay. Akali responded and immediately flew over. Sui couldn't help but shake his head with a smile. Akali was now nearing 50 years old, but she was still as impatient as a young girl. She really couldn't change no matter what he said. Not long after, the dragons stopped and then flew over to Sui with Akali. One of the dragons didn't carry the metal boxes on her back. After flying in front of Sui, she transformed into the appearance of a human girl. She was the first dragon Sui had seen. "Hey, Miss Cassandra, hello." Sui greeted with a smile. Cassandra tilted her head and looked at Sui for a while, then asked Akali with a puzzled expression, "Who is this?" Akali rolled her eyes. "This is our president. Haven't you seen him before?" "Sorry, you humans all look the same in my eyes, so I didn't recognize him for a while." Cassandra responded without apology. She hesitated for a moment before reaching out a hand to Sui. "Hello, Chairman Su, it's nice to see you again." Sui was a bit surprised as he reached out to shake her hand. "Miss Cassandra, I haven't seen you in a few years. Compared to before, you seem to be much more familiar with our human etiquette." Chapter 1192. Cassandra shrugged. "Of course, I've been hanging out with you humans all these years. It would be strange if I wasn't familiar with you." After that, she turned to look at Akali. "Don't you think so?" Akali laughed. "Yes, Cassandra hangs out with me all day long. I taught her some of the necessary etiquette between humans." Sui glanced at Cassandra, thinking that after Akali came to the Demon Cloud continent, she really became good friends with Cassandra, a red dragon. Looking at the appearance of the two, their relationship was probably better than human best friends. And it was precisely because of the relationship between Akali and Cassandra that the new flyer gradually established a cooperative relationship with the Red Dragon Clan where Cassandra was and the Black Dragon Clan where Leon was. "Miss Cassandra, this place is thousands of kilometers away from where you live. Don't you think it's troublesome for you and these people to come here to help Akali?" Sui asked again. "What's the trouble?" Cassandra looked puzzled. "There is good food and drink here, and there are also fun things to do. Your new flyer also pays us. Even if we want to go back, we can fly for a few days. Why would it be troublesome?" Sui looked at the other dragons, and then found that it was obviously impossible to see any expression on their faces, so he could only cough and turn to Akali. "How do you decide on the reward for these dragon friends?" Akali smiled. "It's very simple. Just make sure that they have magic illusion movies to watch." Sui was speechless. What kind of reward is this? However, Cassandra's eyes lit up and she nodded repeatedly. "Well, it's enough as long as there are good movies to watch. And because this place is closer to signs, we can watch the new movies one step earlier than those guys at home. Every time we go back, they are so envious, haha." Looking at Cassandra, who was laughing loudly, and the dragons beside her, who were letting out unknown roars as if they were also laughing, Sui suddenly found that his worldview had slightly collapsed. "Miss Cassandra, I have good news this time. I think you will like it." Cough. "Our new flyer plans to further invest in the Demon Cloud continent this time. We're going to build a magic illusion projection device factory on the Demon Cloud continent." Cassandra blinked, but she was not very happy. "Our clansmen already have magic illusion projectors. What does your factory have to do with us?" "Of course." Sui smiled. "The magic illusion projector isn't just a magic illusion projector, it also includes a large-scale magic illusion projector, a real-time broadcasting system, a multifunctional magic illusion recording device, and so on. With these, if your people are willing, they can even film their own magic illusion film." This time, Cassandra's eyes widened, and she was obviously excited. "Really? We can also make illusion films? Why not?" Su-yi smiled and spread out his hands. My wife. Oh, she is the president of the New Moon Chamber of Commerce. As for the New Moon Chamber of Commerce, I don't think I need to introduce it. Seeing Cassandra nod, Su-yi continued, she has always hoped to promote magic illusion films on the Demon Cloud continent, and she has come to the Demon Cloud continent for inspection before. It's just that last time she thought that the conditions on the Demon Cloud continent were not enough, so she didn't do much for the time being. But now, she thinks that the time is basically ripe, so she plans to promote magic illusion films on the Demon Cloud continent. If you dragons are interested, you can participate in this plan and learn how to make illusion films. Is she willing to teach us? Cassandra asked doubtfully. Don't you humans like to hide good things and not share them? Su-yi glanced at her, thinking that the dragon's desire for treasures was probably stronger than that of humans. Of course, we humans are willing to share things that are good for everyone. How about it? Cassandra, are you interested? Cassandra rolled her eyes and nodded vigorously. Of course, we are interested. Although the illusion films of the New Moon Chamber of Commerce are very good, most of them are stories about you humans. Only a few other races have appeared, but we dragons have never appeared. If we know how to make illusion films, then I must make an illusion film that tells the story of us dragons. If there was this kind of movie, I think that it would be very popular in our human world. Su-yi said with a laugh. Discussing the topic of illusion films, the relationship between Su-yi and these dragons was quickly pulled closer. Moreover, Cassandra was indeed a dragon without scheming, and with Akali as an intermediary, Su-yi quickly pulled the relationship between the two sides closer. By the time he, Akali, Cassandra, and the other dragons returned to the island, the two sides were already talking happily. Chairman Su, after the New Moon Chamber of Commerce arrives on the Demon Cloud continent, you have to inform me as soon as possible. Before parting, Cassandra also specially reminded Su-yi. Okay, no problem. Su-yi smiled and waved his hand. He watched Cassandra and several other red dragons, who had also transformed into human form, return to their residence on the island to rest. Then he looked up at the endless sky above his head and said to Akali beside him, I will stay here for about a month. Do you think it can be done? Akali made a reassuring gesture. 1 month is more than enough. In fact, I have prepared everything. I'm just waiting for the aerostat to arrive. Next, I just need to make some adjustments according to the detailed data. I believe it can be done. Really? That's good. In fact, Su-yi didn't think that he could complete the data debugging work that was simple to say, but it must be extremely complicated to do in a short month. But since Akali was confident, he wouldn't pour cold water on her. Actually, if it weren't for the lack of progress in the research of the Power Research Department, we wouldn't need to use this high-altitude magic signal beacon at all. Akali sighed helplessly. There's no other way. This is what Sir President often says. The magic industry is a whole system, and it is often linked. You see, if we can achieve hyperspace magic signal transmission, we can watch the magic illusion program on signs at any time on this island, right? Having said that, Akali's expression moved, and she looked up at the sky. Speaking of which, Sir President, is what you said before true? As long as we reach a certain speed, we can leave the planet under our feet and fly directly into the universe? Of course, as long as your speed can reach or exceed the first cosmic speed, you can leave the planet under your feet. However, we still need to observe and measure the various data of the planet under our feet before we can calculate this more accurately. This is a very complicated project, so in fact, even if the Power Research Department has a breakthrough, it can't be done in a short period of time. Just thinking about what you said about looking down on the entire planet in the universe makes me feel so excited. Akali's face was filled with fascination. That experience must be very magical. I must experience it for myself in this life. Su-yi smiled slightly. You've been so high up in the sky these days, I believe you've seen half of the planet, right? Far from enough. Akali pouted. Sir President, you told us before that there was a huge sphere under our feet, but I didn't believe it. Although it was later proved by the fleet's circumnavigation of the world, it was really difficult to understand the concept without seeing it with your own eyes. But these days, when I was working with my dragon friends at such a high altitude, I casually looked around and found that the ground under our feet was really round, which looked very strange. Speaking of this, a trace of doubt appeared on Akali's face. Say, there must have been many magicians who flew high up in the sky in the past, so they should have seen what I saw. Why didn't they realize that there was a huge sphere under our feet and not a flat piece of land? Very simple, because they never thought in this direction before. Also, which magician would fly so high for no reason? That's true, only you, Sir President, would be so bored to think about these problems. Sui shook his head, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. All right, let's think about flying in the sky in the future. I'm here for a month this time, but not to help you build a signal beacon. I have other important things to do, so I can't always stay on the island. But since I'm here, you can ask me directly if you have any questions or requests. I'll try my best to satisfy you. Akali nodded, not really caring about Sui's promise. Anyway, even if Sui didn't come, the research team led by her maintained very high priority in New Flyer. However, she was still very concerned about the other important things that Sui mentioned. Is it related to the elves who came this time? Something like that. Sui sighed. This matter is not only related to our New Flyer, but it might also be related to all humans and all other races. Is it that serious? Akali widened her eyes in surprise. What's going on? Sui glanced at Akali, and suddenly remembered that she was always with Cassandra, so there was no need to hide this matter from her. Akali, have you heard about the abyss demons from Cassandra? Chapter 1193. 6 days later, Sui appeared on an unknown island that was around 200 kilometers to the northwest of the space island base. Where are the ruins? When the magic airship stopped, Sui asked the commander of the magic airship that brought them here, Santander. This island wasn't big and they could see it from the sky, but they didn't see anything strange. Sir Chairman, look over there. Santander pointed at the center of the island through the porthole of the magic airship. Do you see it? There were a few particularly thick trees, and it was under those trees that we found what appeared to be the remains. Then let's prepare to move. Sui nodded before turning to look around. He saw the excited Akali and Elder Undine, who had a much more serious expression. Elder Undine, you are more familiar with these ruins. Do you have anything to say? This time Sui led the New Flyers team out of the main base. On the surface, his goal was to head to the Demon Cloud continent to personally guide the New Flyers' development on the Demon Cloud continent. But his secret goal was to visit Akali's overseas research base and ask about the research progress. The other goal was to explore the Abyss Demon race's ruins in this area. As for the Abyss Demon race, the first time Sui heard about them was from Mentor Carmilla, but then he learned more about them from Cassandra. However, if one were to talk about the initial understanding, it would be through Elder Undine. The Azhara tribe had the most complete inheritance among the elven tribes in the signs. Moreover, they had a part of the inheritance of the elven royal court, so naturally they knew more about the history of the continent than the other elves. When Sui tried to ask Elder Undine about the Abyss Demon race, the answer he received was far more detailed than he could have imagined. According to Elder Undine's information, the Abyss Demon race was indeed a powerful race that ruled the signs before the elves. Later, due to the internal turmoil, the Abyss Demons suffered a large number of casualties. As a result, their population was greatly reduced, and they were almost completely wiped out. It was said that the remaining abyssal demons had gone to the depths of the endless ocean with their powerful abilities, and then opened a portal to another world. They left this world and disappeared without a trace ever since. As for what Mentor Carmilla said about the abyss demons possibly returning from another world, Elder Undine said that the probability was very low. This was because the abyssal demons had left this world for more than 10,000 years. If they had the ability or were willing to return, they would have returned long ago. Since there was no news of any abyssal demons appearing in this world for such a long time, it could be assumed that they had completely disappeared. This answer disappointed Sue. Through the various rumors about the abyssal demon race and the records of the elves, Sue was almost certain that the so-called abyssal demon race was actually a race with a highly developed civilization and powerful technological abilities. Just the War of Doomsday of the abyssal demon race recorded in the legends of the elves had fully reflected this point. In the description of this War of Doomsday, many texts indicated that the so-called War of Doomsday was a civil war in the abyssal demon race. They used the most powerful weapons they had, and as a result, most of the abyssal demon race died directly, so the population plummeted. It was precisely because of this reason that the abyssal demon race left this world through the portal. In the records and legends with obvious speculation, it indicated that the abyssal demon race felt that this world was no longer suitable for their survival, so they left. This so-called War of Doomsday reminded Sue of the Doomsday scenes described in many literary novels on Earth. Wasn't the legendary, most powerful weapon the same as nuclear weapons on Earth? In the novels, movies, and so on Earth, there were countless fantasies of a nuclear war breaking out on Earth, and then the entire Earth fell into doomsday. Humans lost their living space, and could only seek for survival. Wasn't the records about the abyssal demon race very similar to this? Therefore, Sue interest in the abyssal demon race became even stronger. Elder Undine happened to provide Sue with a piece of news that surprised him at this time. The elves actually knew about the ruins left behind by the abyssal demon race. According to Elder Undine's explanation, the elves appeared on this continent more than 10,000 years ago, but after they appeared, they had been enslaved by the abyssal demon race and helped them do the lowest manual labor. After the War of Doomsday, when the participating abyssal demon race decided to leave this continent that was not suitable for them to live on, they also asked the elves to help them build a portal, so the elves' ancestors left some records. However, most of these records were passed down orally, and the authenticity was not high. However, some of them could be confirmed because the descriptions in all the records and legends were extremely similar. Most of the contents were descriptions of the abyssal demon race when they left this world. And in these descriptions, the most important thing was that the elves' ancestors actually left behind the location of the abyssal demon race's portal. After spending some time with Elder Undine to research this matter, Sue roughly determined the location of the portal that the abyssal demon race used to leave this world. It was near the sea where the Sky Island was located. Akali chose the Sky Island as the location of the overseas research base, not only because this location was indeed suitable for the location of the first magic signal floating in the air, but also because of Sue-Yi's private request. Previously, Sue-Yi did not explain to Akali why he did this, but 6 days ago, when Sue-Yi explained the abyssal demon race to Akali, he told her everything. Akali was originally a person who liked to explore and pursue new things. After knowing such a novel thing, she naturally pestered him to come over. There's nothing to explain. Elder Undine shook her head. Elder Undine shook her head. The abyssal demon race has already left this world for over 10,000 years, so even if there was a mechanism, it would have already lost its effect. Of course, it's not wrong for everyone to be a bit more careful. It's like this. Sue-Yi thought about it and found that there was nothing to add, so he waved his hand. Let's go, but remember to follow my orders and be careful. The group responded and formed a small team that carefully left the magic airship. The 2 elven warriors and 2 magicians from the new flyer were in front of the team. With the powerful senses of the elves and the sensitivity of human magicians, even if something happened, they would be able to react immediately and detect any abnormalities ahead of time. The strongest ones in the team, Sue and Elder Undine, were focused, controlling the magic space around them. If there was any change, they would immediately react. However, facts proved that they were too careful. From the beach where the magic airship was, to the large trees in the center of the island, other than meeting some blind beasts, they didn't meet any accidents at all, not to mention any danger. Of course, if it really was that dangerous, the exploration team they sent before wouldn't have been able to find the ruins that easily. Not long after, the group safely arrived under the exceptionally thick trees. Sue could see with a single glance that there was an open space under the large trees that was clearly beneficial to the environment. The open space was in a square shape, and it was all made of a special kind of stone. It completely separated the grass to the side, so it looked very strange. And in this open space that was around the size of a basketball court, there was a thick pillar standing there. This pillar was even thicker than the large tree that needed 2 people to wrap around. The surface seemed to be made of stone, but it also seemed to be made of metal, so one couldn't see through it at a glance. The surface of the pillar was very smooth and didn't have any gaps at all, so one could tell that it was made by man. This pillar was around 10 meters tall, and there was a round ball at the top. The material was a bit different from the pillar and the color was a bit closer to metal. But other than that, this bead didn't have anything special about it. Elder Undine, do you know what this thing is? Sue asked. Elder Undine shook her head. I don't know. In the records that have been passed down, it only said that there were ruins here, but there weren't any other descriptions. I guess the elven ancestors back then didn't know what these things were used for or the specific principles behind them. Sue nodded in agreement. Tens of thousands of years ago, the elven ancestors had just appeared on this continent, and had always been used by the abyssal demons. Naturally, they didn't know much about the abyssal demon civilization, so it was natural that they didn't know this. There isn't a single magic pattern on it, just what is it for? Akali patted the pillar, but it didn't move at all. Things used by the abyss demon race might not be magic. Sue smiled and shook his head. Then, he walked to the side of the pillar and patted it. Akali rolled her eyes at him and said, You said that the abyss demon race didn't use magic, but you still used magic to detect it. Don't you think you're lying to yourself? Sue smiled and said, That might not be the case. The mana in his body moved and began to condense the magical elements in the surrounding magic space into the pillar. Although the technology used by the abyss demon race might have nothing to do with magic, it was still a way of using energy. Magic happened to be a more special way of using energy, and its biggest feature was that it was very flexible. Of course, Sue didn't know the original function of this pillar, but there was still hope if he used magic to detect it. Chapter 1194. On the current science continent, the understanding of magic was no longer as simple as using magic to condense elemental magic to form magic. Under the guidance of Suyi's scientific view of magic, the mages and signs were able to delve deeper into the essence of magic and become more detailed. The most obvious example was that the requirements for any spell would be supported by countless precise data and statistics. It was far from the vague and superficial descriptions such as feeling, sensing, and making oneself feel that it is the most suitable for you in the past. Take the simplest fireball spell as an example. The description of the fireball spell would be divided into the amount of magical elements needed, the way they were formed, the speed of condensation, the deviation caused by the waves, the temperature, size, and shape of the flames after the formation of the fireball, and so on and so forth. Moreover, the data would be adjusted according to the situation of different mages. It was far more troublesome than learning the fireball spell in the past. However, the advantage was that as long as one mastered this method, it was equivalent to completely mastering the fireball spell. One would even have a deep understanding of fire magic, and learning other spells would be a piece of cake. Of course, the current magicians of the Signs continent wouldn't learn the fireball spell, the water arrow spell, the falling stone spell, or other traditional elemental magic like before because it had no meaning to the development of the magic machine industry. What everyone needed to learn was much more profound than this. Just like right now, if it was like before, if Sui wanted to use magic to investigate, he would just release his magic to affect the magic elemental energy in the surrounding space. Using this to test the reaction, he would only receive the feedback related to magic. However, now that Sui had decided to use magic to detect something, he first had Akali take out a machine and place a few probes on the pillar. Only then did he place his hand on the pillar and start to release his mana slowly and accurately. In fact, this task could be done with just this machine alone. However, because he did not understand the pillar in front of him, and because it could be a relic of the Abyss demons, Sui did not trust the machine and decided to do the detection himself. As a powerful archmage, his control over magical elements might not be as strong or as precise as a machine's, but he was far more flexible than a machine. Once he discovered a problem, he would be able to react immediately. Su Yi's magic, strictly speaking, it was just brainwaves released by his mental power, began to influence the surrounding magical elements to gather into the pillar. After the mana reached a certain amount, Sui paused and began to continuously change the frequency of the mana vibrations, thus affecting the vibration frequency of the mana elements. According to the results of the Frestek Chamber of Commerce's research 8 years ago, changing the frequency of magic vibrations could affect the frequency of magic elemental vibrations. Different vibrations of magic elemental vibrations would create different energy waves and even different forms of energy. Going deeper, it had to do with the latest magic core energy theory. However, there was no need to delve too deeply into the current situation. What Sui needed to use was another characteristic of this theory. In his research, Sui discovered that the energy forms of magical elements with different vibration frequencies could simulate almost all the energy forms he currently knew. For example, the most commonly used electricity on Earth was actually reflected in the upgrade of traditional wind magic, lightning magic. The only problem was that when magicians used lightning magic in the past, they didn't care about voltage or current at all. But after Sui discovered this, he requested the Frestek Chamber of Commerce's magic research facility to do even more research on it. Because of this, they realized that they could use magic to create a controllable direct current effect on Earth. He even used this current to successfully light up a tungsten wire. Of course, compared to the more convenient and simple magic lamps, electric lamps were much more efficient and costly. However, Sui would not give up what was close at hand for what was far away. However, through this research, Sui's understanding of magic had deepened. He firmly believed that as long as he continued to conduct in-depth research, magic, which sounded backward, could in fact become an advanced system that surpassed modern technology on Earth. Now, the topic was back to Sui's evaluation. According to his previous research, he could now rely on his super-precise control of magical elements to simulate countless energy forms. His idea was to use various energy forms to stimulate this pillar and see if there was any possibility of it reacting. At first, the pillar did not have any reaction at all. It was like an ordinary stone, and no matter how much Sui tossed it around, it did not move an inch. However, when Su-yi increased the amount of magical elements condensed for the third time and simulated them into electricity again, the surface of the pillar suddenly flashed with a faint light. Akali, Elder Undine, and the rest who were bored from waiting at the side suddenly exclaimed in surprise and widened their eyes in unison. Akali glanced at the data displayed on the machine and loudly said, "Total amount of magical elements 3. 723 AI, frequency 25. 391 Hz, curved angle 193. 37 degrees, projectile wave band." A lot of data was reported that confused the rest, but Su-yi quickly grasped the meaning behind it. He immediately readjusted the magic and simulated the form of magical elements energy just now. As expected, the surface of the pillar lit up again with a faint light. However, this light was too weak. If not for the fact that everyone had been staring at the pillar, they might have missed it. Akali frowned and thought for a while, then said to Su-yi, "Mr. President, try increasing the intensity?" "Okay." Su-yi nodded and condensed more magical elements into the pillar. As he condensed more magical elements, the light became brighter and brighter. When the light became slightly dazzling, Su-yi stopped. However, when everyone looked at the pillar, they found that other than the light, there were no other changes. "Mr. President, try increasing the voltage of the simulated electricity again?" Akali suggested. Su-yi muttered to himself. If this pillar was actually hiding a precision instrument that required electricity, then if he rashly increased the voltage, it was very likely that the internal structure would be damaged. After thinking for a while, he decided to change the method. Su-yi did not continue to increase the voltage of the simulated electricity. Instead, he dispersed some of the magical elements and lowered the energy level. Then, he carefully controlled the magical elements to form very weak electric arcs and probed them into the pillar. Su-yi then controlled the electric arcs to go everywhere in the pillar. According to the changes in resistance when the electric arcs flowed in the pillar, Su-yi quickly figured out the situation in the pillar. The interior of the pillar was definitely made of metal with excellent conductivity, and it was very complicated. It was obvious that he guessed that there was a precision instrument inside. However, after figuring this out, he did not dare to investigate further. The level of technology of the Abyss Demons should be quite high, so the precision of the instrument they left behind was obviously very high. If he accidentally broke it, then the loss would outweigh the gain. After pondering for a while, he asked Elder Undine, "Elder Undine, I heard from Steel that the Azhara tribe also has a special clairvoyance magic?" Elder Undine glanced at the others around and nodded slightly. "Yes. Why? Can we use it now?" "We can't use it now, but it should be possible if we modify it." Su-yi then turned to Santander and said, "In a while, you and your men will return to Signs as fast as possible and find Steel. Tell her that I need her to send the New Moon Chamber of Commerce's Magic Clairvoyance Projector research team over." Everyone looked at Su-yi with a strange expression. Akali couldn't help asking, "Sir President, you can't be thinking of using that magic clairvoyance projector to see the situation inside the pillar, right? I don't think it's possible, right?" If it was possible, Elder Undine would definitely use it. Elder Undine nodded and admitted, "Yes, I just tested it with clairvoyance magic and couldn't see anything." "And now?" Su-yi slapped the pillar again. Magic came out and the pillar emitted light again. Elder Undine looked over, and a trace of surprise appeared on her face. "It seems I can see something," Akali asked in surprise. "Why is it like this?" "It's very simple. I heard from Steel that clairvoyance magic can only be used on living things, it's useless on dead things. So my guess is that clairvoyance magic isn't actually clairvoyance magic, but rather it reacts according to some special flow inside the object, creating an effect similar to clairvoyance." Elder Undine looked at Su-yi in surprise, a trace of admiration in her voice. Chairman Su, you really are a super genius in magic. That's right, the principle of clairvoyance magic is roughly the same as what you said. It's just a very simple conjecture. Su-yi waved his hand and took it back. He looked at the pillar again and sighed. Now that we don't have enough conditions, we can only give up for now. When Santander comes back with reinforcements, we'll check it out again. Akali was a bit disappointed. Then wouldn't we have wasted our time these past few days? Su-yi shrugged. Being impatient in research won't solve the problem. Since Su-yi had made his decision, everyone wouldn't waste their time here. After marking this place on the map, everyone left the island in the magic airship. After around an hour, the magic airship brought everyone back to the space island. Then Santander followed Su-yi's orders and immediately stood up to signs. With the speed of the magic airship, it would take a day and a half to travel 6,000 kilometers. Then counting the time it took for Santander to contact Steele and make arrangements with Steele, it would take at least a week for him to go back on his word. Of course, we can't be idle for a week. We have to keep searching. The ruins left behind by the Abyss Demon race definitely isn't just one place. After Su-yi made the arrangements for the next few days, his eyes fell onto the excited Akali. Don't be happy, this matter isn't related to you. Your main job right now is to build the road signs. Akali was stunned. Chapter 1195. There was indeed more than one ruin. In the next few days, the magic airship team that had been searching the surrounding seas found 2 more ruins hidden on the island. It was exactly the same as the first ruin that they had discovered before. These 2 ruins were also like 2 stone pillars. Su-yi's group tested these 2 ruins and the results were the same as the first ruin. After waiting for a few days, Santander, who was sent back to Signs, brought a research team for the new Moon Chamber of Commerce's magic see-through projector, as well as a research team sent by Evita. After they came, Su-yi redistributed the task. Akali was still focused on the magic signal beacons that she was in charge of. As for the 2 research teams, they worked with Elder Undine and several elven magicians from the Azhara tribe who were also proficient in see-through magic, focusing on researching the magic see-through projector. As for the magic airship team that Su-yi brought, they would continue searching the surrounding seas. Su-yi was certain that there shouldn't only be 3 ruins. If they could find all the ruins left by the Abyss Demon clan in this area and crack the secrets within, perhaps they could solve the eternal mystery of why the Abyss Demon clan left this world. Of course, whether it was excavating the ruins or researching the magic see-through projector, it would take a large amount of time. Akali's work couldn't be finished in a short period of time, so after Su-yi participated in some initial guidance, he left the space island according to his plan. When Su-yi sat in the magic airship and crossed the 4,000-kilometer distance between the space island and the Demon Cloud continent, landing at the base that New Flyer had built on the east coast of the Demon Cloud continent, the large fleet that the New Flyer had set off with Su-yi had already arrived and they began their work. When Su-yi came out of the magic airship, he saw 2 parallel lines in the distance, reflecting the light of the silver lines that extended into the distance. If there was another person who had transmigrated from Earth here, they would definitely be able to recognize that these 2 silver lines clearly represented 2 railroad tracks. In fact, when the Frestec Chamber of Commerce's annual steel production surpassed 5 million tons, Su-yi already had the idea of laying down railway tracks, wanting to introduce trains to this world. However, the railway was not connected to the highway. If the roads were randomly paved, it would be easy to connect them to each other. Thus, the traffic on the entire Signs would be unimpeded. However, because the cost of building a railway was much higher, there were also many limitations. It had to be on the track to operate. With the situation of the Signs continent, wanting to build a railway that connected the various countries of the continent was no different from a fool's dream. Therefore, Su-yi had always had reservations about promoting railways in the signs. After all, the steel production in the signs was not that abundant, and most countries in the signs did not have the ability and courage to invest in railways. But on the Demon Cloud continent, there was no need to worry about this. After 10 years of hard work, the new flyer had already controlled over 40,000 square kilometers of land on the Demon Cloud continent. In this area, there was no problem for the new flyer to do anything. They didn't need to report to the other powers at all. So Su-yi didn't hesitate to test the construction of the first railway here. After 3 years of development in this large area controlled by the new flyer, not only were there several roads, there were also 2 railways that went from east to west and north to south. With a few magic airships providing air transport, the traffic in this area had become very developed. When Su-yi's eyes fell onto the railway, there was a magic train that had 13 carriages that gave 2 loud cries. It slowly drove out of the station in the main base before gradually accelerating, disappearing into the horizon not long after. Where is it headed? Su-yi looked away and asked the manager of the new flyer's Demon Cloud continent base, Barnett, who had come to greet him. It's a batch of steel arrowheads headed to the Greenwater tribe. Barnett didn't even turn as he immediately replied, the Greenwater tribe is planning on expanding their territory to the southwest, so they ordered a batch of weapons from us to deal with those annoying goblins. The Greenwater tribe was a native elf tribe of the Demon Cloud continent that lived near the new flyer base. They had sent a representative to the signs before and reached a cooperation agreement with the new flyer. During these years, the Greenwater tribe and the other local elf tribes, dwarf tribes, and halfling tribes had greatly increased the battle strength of their tribes through their cooperation with the Frestec Chamber of Commerce. Not only did they stabilize their situation, they also worked with the Frestec Chamber of Commerce's guards to fight back against the gnomes who had bullied them before. In this area, the new flyer was without a doubt the strongest and the goblins couldn't do anything. With the acquiescence of the new flyer, the other native tribes didn't hesitate to expand their territory. Because of their hard work, there wasn't a single goblin tribe that could survive in this wide area. In fact, according to Barnett's report, there might not even be a single goblin left in this area. Oh? If they want to increase their weapons, why don't they just buy military magic machines from us? Although we won't sell high-end products like the magic cannons to them, we can still sell normal magic repeating crossbows. No matter how you look at it, it's much better than them shooting arrows. Su-yi said in a confused voice. Sir President, there's something you don't know. The smile on Barnett's face was a little helpless, and he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Barnett revealed a helpless smile. I've recommended the magic repeating crossbows to many of the native elf tribes, but they all refused to use them. They said that the magic repeating crossbows went against their traditional spirit, so they weren't willing to use them. What is traditional spirit? Su-yi was surprised. Don't tell me that the elves here have been bullied by the goblins for all these years, and they're still sticking to this so-called tradition. I don't know about this. Anyway, they don't like the magic repeating crossbows. After pausing, Barnett didn't wait for Su-yi to ask as he continued, as for the other military magic machines. Even if it's the lowest grade, they don't have the money to buy it. Su-yi pursed his lips. The description of the native elves of the Demon Cloud continent flashed in his mind, and his heart filled with a trace of absurdity. Although the elves of the Signs continent had most of their living space invaded by humans, with over 10,000 years of history, the elves of the Signs had countless rich inheritances, so they couldn't be considered poor. But the native elves of the Demon Cloud continent, when Su-yi saw them for the first time, he felt pity for them. As elves, they were so poor that they didn't even have a complete set of clothes. This was a bit too pitiful. Even if the Greenwater tribe ordered these steel arrowheads, it would have cost them a large amount of blood. That's not right. Su-yi suddenly frowned. Didn't I always tell you not to just look at the humans, but to unite with the other races of the Demon Cloud continent? It doesn't matter if these elves don't have money, as long as you arrange some work for them, they will definitely be very willing to accept it. Why are they still so poor? Barnett smiled bitterly. President, you don't know. These native races of the Demon Cloud continent have a much deeper prejudice against us humans than the other races of the Signs continent. I've been trying to get them to work for us over the years. I wanted to take the opportunity to incorporate them, but not many tribes agreed. Prejudice? Sui was a little puzzled. These other races of the Demon Cloud continent have directly sent representatives to the Signs continent before and reached a cooperation agreement with us. If they have a deep prejudice against us humans, why would they do this? It's not quite accurate to say that they have prejudice. It should be said that. It's more like they are wary of us. Barnett replied. Wary? Sui narrowed his eyes and swept his gaze across the base. He found that in this huge base, he could actually see some other races. From the differences in some details, he could distinguish the other races of the Demon Cloud continent from the other races brought by the New Flyer continent. Looking at the situation here, it wasn't that all the native races were unwilling to work for the New Flyer. These other races are all tribes that were completely destroyed by the goblins, so they are just individual businesses. They aren't like the other races whose tribes are still wary of us. Seeing Su Yi's gaze fall on the other races that were recruited locally, Barnett explained. Oh! The corners of Su Yi's mouth rose slightly, revealing a slightly mocking smile. It seems that they aren't that unyielding. They still know how to lower their heads at the critical moment. That's good, as long as they are willing to accept reality, they will have a way to deal with it. There was a chill in Barnett's heart. Could it be that Sir Chairman heard his explanation and decided to make all the native races of the Demon Cloud continent become individual businesses? Thinking of this, he couldn't help but advise, Sir Chairman, there are far more other races on the Demon Cloud continent than on the Signs continent. Moreover, our main target is the goblins. If we also kill all these other races, then with the small number of humans on the Demon Cloud continent, we won't be able to support the development of this continent. Sui looked at him in surprise. When did I say that I wanted to kill all these native other races? They are all important labor for our company in the future. How could I be willing to move them? Barnett was stunned. Then Sir Chairman means. Sui patted his shoulder and said with a smile, there isn't a concrete plan yet, but since these other races aren't gods that don't eat the food of mortals and have their own needs, then everything is easy. Chapter 1196. This time, Sui used a huge fleet to bring a huge number of people and materials in order to strengthen the development of the Demon Cloud continent. The so-called development, of course, did not just stop at words. After the fleet arrived at the Demon Cloud continent before Sui, all kinds of work had already begun. Along with the New Flyer, the Amsterdam Chamber of Commerce brought a huge construction team of more than 3,000 people. The task they were responsible for was to continue widening the roads, building factories and residences in the base, greatly expanding the base. They wanted to make it as close as possible to the Fresteck Chamber of Commerce's main base on the Signs continent, or even surpass it. Sui attached great importance to the Demon Cloud continent. The main reason was that the Demon Cloud continent was not like the Signs, where every inch of land had been divided up by various countries or other forces. If the New Flyer wanted to obtain even one more mine in the Signs, it would have to pay a high price. If they wanted to obtain other benefits, they would most of the time have conflicts with other forces in the Signs. In comparison, the Demon Cloud continent could almost be called a land without a master. On this continent, the goblins were in a dominant position. However, the goblins were a backward race with a very low level of civilization. So far, they did not even have a complete country. Therefore, although the goblins were far stronger than other races, they did not really control this continent. As for the use of the various resources on this continent, there was almost no use for them. After the new flyer established a base here, they just casually explored the surroundings and found several mines that had not been developed at all. Now the area controlled by the new flyer had expanded to more than 40,000 square kilometers, including all kinds of mineral resources. It was already extremely rich, even exceeding all the mineral resources that the new flyer currently controlled in the signs. It was precisely because of this that the new flyer's higher-ups had always agreed to maintain a huge investment in the Demon Cloud continent, and also unanimously agreed to greatly increase the investment this time. It must be known that the total investment budget for this operation led by Sui alone had exceeded 100 million gold coins, and it would continue to increase. It could be said that this was the largest investment in the history of the new flyer. Of course, the investment needed to be repaid. The Amrit Chamber of Commerce's construction team was building bricks for the Frestek Chamber of Commerce's main base on the Demon Cloud continent, desperately expanding it. The Frestek Chamber of Commerce's guards in front also had the 5,000 guards that Sui brought, increasing the speed at which they expanded their territory. After the new flyer fleet arrived at the Demon Cloud continent, and before Sui arrived at the Demon Cloud continent, the new flyer guards had already swept through the goblins on the periphery of the territory. In just 13 days, they had fought with the goblins more than 50 times, wiped out more than 10 large and small goblin tribes, and eliminated more than 7,000 goblins. While expanding their territory, they also gained control of an iron mine and a precious non-ferrous metal vein. After Sui arrived, New Flyer continued to expand under his personal planning. In just 2 months, the area controlled by the Frestek Chamber of Commerce went from 40,000 square kilometers to 50,000 square kilometers. In the process of expanding their territory, the new flyer guards drove out the goblins in the front while the Amsterdam Chamber of Commerce's engineering team built roads and railroad tracks in the back. At the same time, they kept building sentry forts along the way. At the same time, New Flyer built more magic signal towers to maintain the magic communication coverage in their new territory. Through convenient transportation and communication methods, the Frestek Chamber of Commerce's new territory could be firmly controlled. Even if the goblins attacked out of revenge, they were quickly counterattacked by the new flyer guards each time and didn't even have time to cause any damage. The goblins were a backward race that relied on their large numbers to dominate the Demon Cloud continent. The weapons they used were stone weapons that couldn't even be considered sharp. So in front of the military magic machines of the new flyer guards that far surpassed the standards of this world, they were like helpless children. The new flyer guards fought the goblins countless times, but they didn't feel threatened at all. Although the goblins didn't have high intelligence, they weren't stupid. After fighting many times, they found that when faced with these strange enemies, it didn't matter how many they sent out. They knew that they couldn't fight them at all. So after a long time, the goblins regarded the area controlled by New Flyer as a forbidden area and didn't dare invade. After expanding their territory to over 10,000 square kilometers in a single breath, in order to stabilize the situation and let the guards rest, New Flyer stopped expanding their territory and began to focus on developing. ####. A drop of sweat came out of Suyi's forehead and gathered into the sweat on his forehead. It formed a small stream that flowed down his cheeks and finally dripped down his chin. Sui narrowed his eyes and looked up at the blazing sun in the sky. He thought that the summer here was even more uncomfortable than the summer in the Principality of Constantine. Could it be because the dimension was lower and it was closer to the equator of the planet under him? If possible, He wanted to stay in his room in the base and enjoy the coolness of the magic air conditioner. But he couldn't, at least not today. Today was a very memorable day. The new flyer base on the Demon Cloud continent had been proposed by Sue. They had decided to open up new land on the Demon Cloud continent, breaking away from the situation where they had to rely on the Signs base for food and becoming self-sufficient. In order to show how important this decision was, Sue even personally went to the ground to plow and plant seeds. Because he hadn't done this kind of physical work in a long time, after working for less than half an hour, Sue was already covered in sweat. Actually, he didn't need to do this. After all, this was the land reclamation led by New Flyer. With the various agricultural magic machines that New Flyer had, there wasn't anything that needed manpower. Sue doing this was purely for show. After he finished his show, the agricultural magic machines that had already been prepared charged into the field. It didn't take long before they finished plowing several dozen hectares of land. Sue could only give a self-deprecating laugh at this. These agricultural magic machines were developed by him, but now these fellows had humiliated him in front of all these people. According to the plan, the New Flyer's first cultivation this year would be opening up 30,000 hectares of land. After all of this land was planted with wheat, even if they used the agricultural magic machines and fertilizers on the Signs continent with the lowest yield of wheat, they would still be able to produce close to 100,000 tons of wheat. It would be enough to satisfy the basic rations of over 60,000 people in the Frestec Chamber of Commerce's base for a year, saving quite a bit of effort for the main base. Of course, this was just barely enough to satisfy the demand. According to Sue's plan, the base here still had a lot of space to expand. It wouldn't just hold 60,000 people in the future, it would be 600,000 or even 6 million people. As the New Flyer base's territory on the Demon Cloud continent became bigger and bigger, it wouldn't be strange for them to have over 60 million people. So this was just the beginning. The final goal was to promote the agricultural magic machines on the Demon Cloud continent, allowing the base to become truly self-sufficient. Thinking of this, Sue turned to look at the Demon Cloud continent natives who were stretching their necks out in the distance. It was a bit funny speaking of this. Whether it was the Signs base or the Demon Cloud continent, there were all kinds of other races. But other than humans, no matter what kind of civilization the other races had, there had never been a single other race that practiced farming. These other races, if they wanted to solve the problem of their survival, most of them would obtain it from nature and never thought of farming. Sue had considered this problem before and found that it was because of this that the other race population on the Signs was much smaller than humans. On the Demon Cloud continent there were only the gnomes, but the gnomes couldn't be used as a reference. This was a race with a backward civilization, they even ate human flesh. The reason why they had such a large population was mainly because they had strong reproductive abilities, just like the mice on Earth. The gnomes had very short lives. They could be considered adults at the age of 10, and there were only a few that could live past 20. So Sue rarely treated the gnomes as an intelligent race. These fellows that were more terrifying than locusts and mice, if they continued to develop, the entire Demon Cloud continent might be swallowed by them. Of course, the other races under the Gnome King were another matter. For example, the elves, dwarves, and pygmies that Sue saw the most here had a relatively complete civilization. With a bit of guidance, they could become very good helpers. So Sue deliberately held this cultivation ceremony with great fanfare, but it was also for these other races to see. At the same time, he had the Signs under the Shinfei Chamber of Commerce secretly contact these other races, telling them the benefits of farming and trying to attract them. Sue wanted to control the entire Demon Cloud continent, so he wouldn't allow these natives to break away from their own lives. He wanted to bring them in and use them for the Shinfei Chamber of Commerce. In the end, what New Flyer lacked the most was manpower. Chapter 1197. Sir Chairman, the representatives of the Fire Dragon tribe are here. Under Barnett's lead, 3 slightly thin and short human men walked into the room. Sue glanced at the 3 and nodded slightly. As early as in the report given by Barnett, the humans on the Demon Cloud continent were generally short and thin due to the lack of food. These 3 representatives were already considered tall in the Fire Dragon tribe, but if Sue stood up, their heads would at most be level with Sue's nose. Hawacha. Sue greeted the 3 with a smile. This was the Fire Dragon tribe's language that meant hello and hello. Sue had specifically asked Barnett about the Fire Dragon tribe's language before, but it was impossible for him to completely learn it in such a short time. He could only barely grasp a few greetings. However, to Sue's surprise, after replying to Sue with Hawacha, the leading man of the Fire Dragon tribe opened his mouth and spoke fluent Signs Common language. Respected Chairman Sue, it's an honor to meet you. The young man smiled and even performed a standard Signs Noble etiquette to Sue. Sue looked at him in surprise and then looked at Barnett. Barnett smiled and pointed at the young man and explained to Sue, Sir Chairman, the 3 of them are representatives specially selected by the Fire Dragon tribe. They are all proficient in our Signs Common language. You can communicate with them as you wish. Is that so? Sue looked at the 3 representatives in surprise. This Fire Dragon tribe was a human tribe that New Flyer accidentally discovered when they were expanding last year. Because they were all humans, the New Flyer immediately paid special attention to the Fire Dragon tribe after discovering them. They quickly established a cooperative relationship with the Fire Dragon tribe and recruited a group of Fire Dragon tribe members to work in the New Flyer. Sue didn't expect that in less than a year, the Fire Dragon tribe would be able to send out 3 representatives who were proficient in the common language of the signs. It was clear that they had put in a lot of effort for the New Flyer. Since all of you know how to speak the common language of signs, that makes things much easier. Sue smiled and nodded at the 3 of them. I wonder if you are familiar with the signs' language other than the language? The 3 of them looked troubled. The young man named Gonemo, who had just replied, shook his head. Our tribe didn't have any written language before, so it's very difficult for us to learn how to write again. The 3 of us don't have any problem speaking, but writing and reading are a bit difficult. Seeing Sue knit his brows, Gonemo immediately said, but we are all seriously studying and I can already recognize close to 200 words. I believe that as long as I have some time, it won't be a problem for me to learn how to write. Not bad. Sue looked at Gonemo with a hint of admiration. He knew how difficult it was for people who didn't have any foundation in writing to learn how to read and write. Gonemo was able to master the common language of signs in less than a year, and even learned close to 200 words. Other than his talent in languages, the most important thing was that he worked hard. But if we don't know how to write, how are we going to sign a contract with you? Sue raised a question. Gonmo's eyes lit up, and a hint of excitement appeared on his face. However, he shook his head and said, Chairman Sue, as long as you're willing to help us, it doesn't matter even if we don't have a written contract. After a pause, he continued, and even if you break the contract, we don't have the ability to cause trouble for you, right? Sue paused for a moment, then smiled. You've thought this through. Since you know the result, will you still be willing to cooperate with us? Of course. Gonemo nodded without hesitation. Chairman Sue, with your strength, you can force us to do anything, but you want to cooperate with us. I don't know what you're thinking, but I know that there's no harm in cooperating with you. Are you sure there's no harm? Sue looked at him with amusement. Gonemo looked at Sue with a calm expression. If you didn't appear, our Fire Dragon tribe would have been wiped out by the goblins sooner or later. Do you think we still need to worry about any harm in cooperating with you? Gonemo said this as if it was only natural, and the expressions of his two companions didn't change at all. It was clear that this wasn't a surprise to them at all. Sui turned to look at Barnett. Barnett coughed lightly and said, "Chairman, when the Chamber of Commerce's guards found the Fire Dragon tribe last year, they were besieged by tens of thousands of goblins. If it wasn't for the guards' help, I'm afraid the Fire Dragon tribe wouldn't exist now." Sui nodded and confirmed that Gon Mo's words were true. He looked at the three short and thin natives of the Demon Cloud continent in front of him and couldn't help but feel a little emotional. They were all humans, and the humans of the signs had already become the masters of the signs. They had established countless countries and had a very good civilization. However, because the natives of the Demon Cloud continent were too weak, they were still stuck in such a backward civilization. Even a mere siege of tens of thousands of goblins was enough to cause the extinction of a human tribe of more than 2,000 people. It could be seen how difficult it was for these natives to survive on the Demon Cloud continent. However, Sui was also very gratified. Before this, he had been worried that the natives of the Demon Cloud continent were backward in terms of civilization and intelligence. They were no different from primitive people. But now, he found that in a small fire dragon tribe, there was someone with a flexible and clear mind like Gon Mo. If his two companions were close to his level, then the intelligence of the natives of the fire dragon tribe should be something to look forward to. Sui needed to recruit a large number of people in the Demon Cloud continent, and the main target would naturally be the natives here. However, if these natives had low intelligence and couldn't be trained, then Sui wouldn't let them drag him down into the Chamber of Commerce. This wouldn't help the new flyer's development on the Demon Cloud continent. Now that he found out, he had more confidence in the Fire Dragon tribe and the natives of the Demon Cloud continent. As long as these natives had normal intelligence, then after training, they could at least master some simple tasks and provide a lot of help to the new flyer. Gon Mo, do you understand the content of our cooperation with your Fire Dragon tribe? Gon Mo pondered for a moment and replied, "You need people to work for you, and we need you to provide protection for our tribe." "Yes, that's it." Sui nodded with satisfaction. "As long as your Fire Dragon tribe is willing to listen to our arrangements, then our Chamber of Commerce will guarantee your safety. In addition, if you do well enough, I don't mind giving your tribe some extra help." Gon Mo's eyes suddenly lit up. He had worked in the new flyer for more than half a year. In addition to mastering the sign's common language, he also had some rough understanding of the various mystical items controlled by the Shinfei Chamber of Commerce. He knew very well how powerful these humans who were said to have come from another continent were. Their strength was not only reflected in the fact that they could easily repel goblins dozens of times their number, but also reflected in every detail of their lives. In the past half a year, he had seen countless mystical items in the new flyer base that he had never even dreamed of before. The effects of many of these items could even be called miracles. If the new flyer was willing to provide protection for the Fire Dragon tribe, then the people of the tribe would no longer have to worry about the threat of the goblins. It was even more likely that they would have enough food and would no longer have to suffer from hunger and cold. To be able to have these benefits was already a great benefit for the Fire Dragon tribe. Not to mention, this Sir President in front of him had just said that he might provide some extra help. If he could let the Fire Dragon tribe have those mystical items, then Gon Mo felt that no matter what price he had to pay, it would be worth it. Sui could clearly see the hope and desire in Gon Mo's eyes. Among the various races on the Magic Cloud continent, the status of humans was far inferior to the elves, dwarves, and gnomes. On the other hand, the elves, dwarves, and gnomes were always worried about the threat of the goblins, let alone these natives. The appearance of the Frestek Chamber of Commerce gave them the guarantee of survival and could even make them stronger. How could they not be filled with anticipation and desire for this? Of course, Sui did not want to teach them too much. First, with their level of civilization, it would be difficult to grasp. Second, Sui did not want these natives to become too powerful. In the end, he needed these people to help the new flyer expand, not to cause trouble for himself. Right, Gonmo, you seem to be working at a construction site of our Chamber of Commerce, right? Sui asked again. Gonmo immediately nodded. Yes. You don't have to do this work now. The cooperation between our Chamber of Commerce and your Fire Dragon tribe requires a middleman. You can take on this responsibility. Also, I hope that you can be my special consultant. I need someone to ask about some things on the Magic Cloud continent. Gonmo did not completely understand Su Yi's meaning. For example, he did not know what a consultant was. However, he was very clear that Su Yi must have taken a fancy to him. This was great news for him, so he did not hesitate at all. He directly knelt down and heavily kowtowed to Su Yi. Su Yi was not used to this etiquette, but he did not avoid it. He only slightly frowned and calmly accepted this big bow. If possible, he hoped that the natives of the Magic Cloud continent would all be in awe of him. Only this way would the development of the new flyer go smoothly. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.